Hanno dato a me la grande responsabilità di aprire questa bella giornata, una giornata importante, una giornata che ha anche l'ambizione di proseguire questa straordinaria esperienza dell'Expo 2015, un successo veramente straordinario, nessuno ci avrebbe forse scommesso. Avete visto gli ultimi dati: al 31 di agosto abbiamo avuto 14 milioni e 200 mila presenze accreditate. È davvero una straordinaria occasione per aver posto all'attenzione mondiale le grandi sfide dell'umanità, le grandi sfide che ci attendono in futuro. Ma dirò qualcosa prima di aprire il dibattito di oggi. Adesso mi corre l'obbligo innanzitutto di ringraziare tutti voi, di chiedere scusa di questo breve ritardo nell'avvio dei lavori e dare quindi subito la parola al protagonista principale, a colui il quale ha voluto la creazione di questo World Food Research Innovation Forum, al Presidente della Regione Emilia-Romagna, Stefano Bonaccini. A te la parola per un saluto, Presidente.
Autorità, signori commissari generali dei paesi partecipanti all'Expo, gentili ospiti europei e internazionali, signore e signori, desidero rivolgere un benvenuto e un saluto mio personale della Regione Emilia-Romagna a tutti per la vostra partecipazione a questo World Food Research and Innovation Forum che si terrà oggi e domani qui all'Esposizione Universale. Siamo immersi nella bellezza e nello stupore che si ripete ogni giorno in questo magnifico scenario mondiale rappresentato dai tantissimi paesi partecipanti, dalle organizzazioni internazionali, dalle imprese. Esposizione universale che ha un titolo affascinante e per me bellissimo: Nutrire il pianeta, energia per la vita, che c'entra esattamente con tutte e due le gambe e i piedi sull'argomento che affronteremo. Assicurare cibo sano e sicuro per tutti sul pianeta costituisce la sfida alla quale ogni paese ci porta a riflettere nei loro magnifici padiglioni, negli eventi internazionali o molto più semplicemente nell'incontro con persone che stanno affollando l'Expo e provenienti da tutto il mondo. Peraltro, cibo sano, sicuro è una delle questioni che anche lo stesso Papa Francesco ha posto nella sua ultima enciclica. Tutto ci porta a vivere questa esperienza straordinaria grazie a una nuova consapevolezza della responsabilità che ne scaturisce per affrontare in modo concreto le sfide dell'alimentazione globale. Il progetto del World Food Research and Innovation Forum ha l'ambizione di portare sulla scena mondiale un modello di elaborazione e di confronto innovativo su argomenti di grande interesse europeo e mondiale. Insieme ai responsabili nazionali e internazionali della politica alimentare globale, ai responsabili delle politiche di regolazione, le organizzazioni internazionali di sviluppo, le imprese alimentari globali, ma anche le piccole e medie imprese, i leader del settore alimentare, i gruppi di consumatori internazionali, la finanza, la scienza, la ricerca e le comunità dell'innovazione. Un progetto ambizioso, ma io credo utile ed importante, rivolto al futuro, che potrà contribuire a costruire nuove risposte a sfide sempre più complesse e correlate a tutti gli aspetti della vita sul pianeta, come da qui al 2050 portare cibo alle 9 miliardi di donne e uomini che si presume ci saranno in quel tempo, senza aumentando appunto la produzione di cibo, e se abbiamo coscienza civile, umana e vogliamo dare dignità alla persona, a chiunque debba essere dato modo di vivere dignitosamente e dunque di sfamarsi per sé e per la propria famiglia. Ma nel fare questo, come evitare di compromettere definitivamente il pianeta e dunque l'attenzione all'utilizzo dell'acqua, dell'aria, dell'energia e quindi l'attenzione al tema dell'ambiente e anche dei suoi cambiamenti climatici. Oggi e domani avremo l'onore di ascoltare, e li ringrazio, eminenti esperti scientifici europei ed internazionali insieme ad importanti rappresentanti delle maggiori istituzioni ed organizzazioni europee e mondiali nelle 2 sessioni di lavoro che vi dedicheremo. Nel World Food Research and Technology Forum avremo la possibilità di ascoltare le relazioni di importanti esperti scientifici sulle principali tematiche legate alla ricerca alimentare e nella tavola rotonda a seguire assisteremo a un confronto di altissimo livello su ricerca e tecnologie per sostenibilità e sicurezza alimentare, in particolare nei paesi emergenti. Nel World Food Safety and Security Forum avremo la grande opportunità di ascoltare le relazioni della Commissione europea, della FAO, della Food and Drug Administration degli Stati Uniti d'America, mentre nella tavola rotonda A seguire un confronto con agenzie e organizzazioni internazionali, la ricerca e imprese globali con una particolare visione del ruolo delle donne in quelle sfide. La sessione finale di domani, mercoledì 23, di domani mattina, avrà un importante confronto internazionale con attori di rilievo mondiali, alla quale le conclusioni saranno affidate al Ministro del Governo italiano all'Agricoltura Maurizio Martina. Peraltro i lavori saranno seguiti anche in streaming presso il Teatro della Terra nel Biodiversity Park, proprio qui vicino. Desidero infine, nel dargli poi la parola, cogliere l'opportunità di rivolgere al dottor Fabrizio Grillo, a nome suo, per ringraziare il dottor Giuseppe Sala, la commissaria Diana Bracco, per un ringraziamento non formale, per aver avuto all'inizio il coraggio, poi l'ambizione, poi la grande capacità organizzativa e manageriale di costruire un evento che, come ricordava prima Paolo De Castro, all'inizio addirittura qualcuno immaginava non si sarebbe tenuto, poi che sarebbe stato poco partecipato e che oggi rimane all'attenzione della scena nazionale, europea ed internazionale con il superamento al 31 luglio di oltre 14 milioni di visitatori e che davvero quel numero di 20 milioni di visitatori che sembrava una sfida impossibile, c'era chi diceva che già arrivare alla metà sarebbe stato un successo, possa essere da qui alla fine di ottobre organizzato. Vi ringrazio davvero per l'onore che ci avete fatto a far diventare quello che quando l'abbiamo lanciato, lo dico con orgoglio, da una regione come l'Emilia Romagna che fa dell'agroalimentare, dell'agroindustria, dell'agricoltura, ma anche che ospita l'EFSA, cioè la sede dell'Agenzia della Sicurezza Alimentare dell'Unione Europea a Parma, nel cuore dell'Emilia Romagna, quando abbiamo avuto l'idea di lanciare questa piattaforma che vogliamo mettere a disposizione di tutti gli attori che ho citato, anche noi eravamo preoccupati se avevamo visto giusto o non era un progetto troppo ambizioso. La platea di oggi pomeriggio, di domani, mi fa dire che quell'ambizione è diventata realtà e noi ci auguriamo che questo sia un piccolo punto di partenza per affrontare una di quelle sfide che saranno una delle sfide più gigantesche che l'umanità e la politica dovrà affrontare nei prossimi anni. Grazie di cuore e buon lavoro.
Bene, grazie al Presidente Bonacini. Adesso anche lui per un saluto, Fabrizio Grillo, Segretario Generale del Padiglione Italia. Grazie, grazie ancora Segretario di Servizio.
Buongiorno a tutti, davvero un paio di minuti per dirvi grazie perché come ricordava il Presidente Bonaccini, l'onorevole De Castro e tutta la delegazione che oggi ci fa l'onore di essere qui ad Expo e in particolare al Padiglione Italia, davvero un grazie perché oramai siamo a un punto nel quale stiamo iniziando a tirare un po' le fila e le conclusioni di questa Expo che sta davvero dimostrando di essere all'altezza del nostro Paese, dell'Europa e del mondo intero. Un'Expo che sta raccogliendo numeri straordinari, come ricordava poc'anzi il Presidente Bonaccini, numeri che all'inizio francamente facevano tremare le vene ed oggi invece sono numeri che crescono quotidianamente. Abbiamo centinaia di migliaia di visitatori ogni giorno, stiamo raggiungendo delle punte straordinarie durante i fine settimana, i numeri ci dicono che a fine del mese di settembre con ogni probabilità raggiungeremo più di 17 milioni di visitatori nei 5 mesi iniziali, ci aspettiamo un mese di ottobre straordinariamente importante anche e non solo per la giornata mondiale dell'alimentazione il 16 di ottobre alla presenza del segretario generale delle Nazioni Unite e del Presidente della Repubblica Sergio Mattarella, quindi una giornata straordinaria per andare verso la chiusura di questa Expo. È un'Expo che ha avuto forse il numero più elevato di partecipazione di paesi, ha avuto certamente il numero più elevato di paesi che hanno realizzato un loro padiglione, ha avuto un numero straordinario di organizzazioni internazionali presenti. Oggi e domani in questo forum abbiamo davvero degli esponenti di primissimo piano che contribuiscono con il loro lavoro tutti i giorni durante l'anno a far sì che il dibattito sulla sostenibilità, sull'accesso al cibo, sulla sicurezza, sull'igiene, su tutti i temi che sono alla base di questa Expo che, ricordiamo, ha avuto ed ha il suo primo punto di successo nel tema nutrire il pianeta, energia per la vita. È un tema straordinario, è un tema su cui fin dall'inizio, dal lontano 2006, quando il governo italiano e la città di Milano decisero di proporsi per questa incredibile sfida, ebbene il tema è stato sempre alla base di tutto. Sul tema abbiamo chiamato tutti i paesi e tutte le organizzazioni internazionali a confrontarsi, abbiamo avuto un risultato straordinario. Potete vedere voi stessi come i padiglioni dei paesi, delle organizzazioni internazionali, i cluster, i padiglioni tematici abbiano davvero fatto uno sforzo straordinario per far sì che la partecipazione fosse basata sul tema. Ebbene, anche e soprattutto i contenuti di approfondimento come il forum odierno e di domani si prefiggono di dare, hanno fatto l'altra faccia dell'Expo. Chi inizialmente diceva non ce la farete mai, l'abbiamo clamorosamente smentito. Chi magari ancora oggi dice a un'Expo sì, di grandi numeri ma di pochi contenuti, momenti come quello di oggi, questo straordinario forum, smentiscono altresì anche questa diceria. Abbiamo davvero 6 mesi, abbiamo avuto 6 mesi straordinari, ogni giorno in questo auditorium ci sono dibattiti, incontri, momenti di approfondimento. Abbiamo discusso del ruolo delle donne nel mondo rispetto al tema dell'alimentazione, stiamo ragionando sul tema dell'acqua che è strategico ed è altrettanto importante perché insieme al cibo l'acqua è fonte di vita. Ci stiamo immaginando e stiamo iniziando a ragionare su cosa potrà accadere nell'area Expo subito dopo il 31 di ottobre. È un altro sforzo incredibile, uno sforzo che per fortuna vede le istituzioni a partire dal governo, dalle regioni al nostro fianco per far sì che non si disperda questo straordinario patrimonio che abbiamo raccolto e quindi ancora una volta uno sforzo comune per un obiettivo davvero strategico. Io vi ringrazio ancora molto, so e ho visto che ci aspettano 2 giorni di grande lavoro, un calendario fittissimo, ospiti straordinari e importanti. Il mio augurio è che oggi e domani si ponga un altro piccolo granello in quello che è il dibattito mondiale su questi temi straordinari. Ringrazio naturalmente il Presidente Bonaccini, la Regione Emilia-Romagna e tutti quelli che hanno fatto questo straordinario sforzo. Grazie a tutti e buon lavoro.
Bene, bene. Grazie anche a te Fabrizio, grazie per aver ricordato gli straordinari numeri di questa manifestazione universale, di questo grande Expo. E adesso compito mio, 5 minuti attraverso 2 slide proprio davvero molto sintetiche che cercheranno di inquadrare meglio il lavoro e anche la sfida che, come ha detto Stefano Bonaccini, Presidente Bonaccini, vorremmo lanciare ufficialmente con la giornata di oggi. Quindi prima di dare la parola al collega amico Fabio Fava, che poi coordinerà la prima sessione di ricercatori, due diapositive che adesso mi danno i potenti mezzi. Ecco qua. Intanto il ruolo. Cos'è il World Food Forum, il World Food Research Innovation Forum? Perché l'abbiamo voluto? Allora, vedete, il tema che abbiamo posto è il tema dell'Expo. Infatti il titolo oggi di questa apertura è esattamente il titolo dell'Expo 2015. Perché è così importante? Perché non vogliamo perdere la straordinaria occasione che ci ha dato l'Expo 2015 di aver portato all'attenzione mondiale il tema della sicurezza alimentare? Io credo che questo rimarrà come il lascito più importante dell'Expo, no? La Carta di Milano parte proprio da lì e sarà nel passaggio a Ban Ki-moon, che tra qualche settimana avverrà, al segretario generale delle Nazioni Unite. La grande sfida è tutta racchiusa in quella sfida. Riusciremo ad alimentare una popolazione mondiale che cresce non solo di numero, ma soprattutto cresce come domanda perché si modifica la dieta alimentare e il mondo incomincia a domandare cibo ad un ritmo superiore di quanto lo stesso mondo non sia in grado di produrre. Quindi una sfida epocale per i ricercatori di tutto il mondo, per quelli che dovranno tentare di dare le risposte a queste grandi sfide. E la terra a disposizione è un dato, e la terra a disposizione non la possiamo aumentare. E quindi il problema di produrre di più con meno risorse è facile a domandarsi, ma non è facilissimo a trovare delle risposte. Qui i ricercatori hanno filoni importantissimi che dobbiamo cercare di coordinare, di lavorare insieme, di dare a loro tutto il supporto necessario, partendo ovviamente dall'Unione Europea, e verrà detto nelle relazioni dopo, ma naturalmente questa è una sfida che interessa tutto il sistema industriale con la responsabilità di un sistema agroindustriale, agricolo e agroalimentare che deve trovare il modo di produrre di più con meno risorse, di produrre di più mantenendo alta la fertilità del terreno, produrre di più inquinando meno. Produrre di più inquinando meno. È facile anche questa domanda, ma è evidente che lo sforzo della ricerca, dell'innovazione in questo campo è straordinario e forse i 6 mesi dell'Expo hanno contribuito a far accrescere la consapevolezza. Ecco, questa credo sia una delle parole chiave che ha spinto anche la Regione Emilia-Romagna a continuare in questo sforzo straordinario che è stato l'Expo, cioè aumentare e continuare a tenere alto la consapevolezza della grande sfida. Non c'è, guardate, non c'è questa consapevolezza. Soprattutto noi, mondo occidentale, in fondo riteniamo che basta scendere sotto casa e il supermercato ci fornirà tutto il cibo di cui abbiamo bisogno, ma questo non è la realtà di un domani prossimo. Perché? Perché il mondo sta cambiando e sta cambiando molto, molto rapidamente, e da ciò la necessità di un governo mondiale delle politiche del cibo. Sì, perché se la dieta alimentare diventerà anche per i paesi asiatici uguale alla nostra, qui ci sono vari studi, tutti hanno lavorato, penso alla stessa FAO, e tra l'altro ringrazio la presenza del Deputy Assistant proprio che si occupa dei temi della sicurezza alimentare, così come ringrazio Michelle Taylor, la presenza della Food and Drug Administration oggi è molto importante, l'Unione Europea, amico, tutti gli amici presenti, non li cito, poi sarà Fabio che ricorderà tutti quanti. Ma dicevo, l'importanza di una politica alimentare globale e quindi dell'impegno di tutti i governi e di tutte le istituzioni internazionali per mantenere alta l'attenzione su questo grande tema. Grande tema che è un po' racchiuso in questa slide, c'è l'equilibrio globale, no? Da una parte c'è la food security, noi abbiamo un problema in italiano, la lingua italiana, perché sia food security che food safety si traducono con la stessa parola, sicurezza alimentare. In realtà nascondono due concetti profondamente diversi. La food security è il tema più centrale, più vicino alle grandi tematiche dell'Expo, cioè il tema della disponibilità di cibo. Dicevo prima, se la dieta alimentare dei cinesi pian pianino si avvicinerà alla nostra, e i dati dimostrano che questo percorso lo hanno avviato, basta ricordare che nei consumi di carne sono arrivati a metà dei consumi pro capite nostri, nell'arco di 20 anni hanno raggiunto i 52-53 kg pro capite di carne, quando noi siamo vicini a 100 kg pro capite. Beh, se dovessero arrivare anche loro vicino a 70, 80, 90 kg, è rapido fare il conto, ci vorrebbero circa 3 pianeti come disponibilità di terra necessaria per produrre tutto il mais, la soia, i cereali necessari per alimentare gli animali che devono poi dare il latte e la carne necessaria a soddisfare quella domanda. Quindi è chiaro che la sfida è planetaria, ecco, la sfida è enorme, e questo richiama il tema naturalmente anche della nutrizione, che è collegato anche al tema della disponibilità alimentare. Perché? Beh, perché abbiamo questi grandi paradossi, no? Questi grandi paradossi che ci colpiscano. Da una parte abbiamo quasi 1 miliardo di cittadini del mondo che soffrono la fame, che muoiono di fame o che comunque hanno gravi problemi di malnutrizione, e poi abbiamo quasi 2 miliardi di cittadini del mondo che invece hanno problemi opposti, cioè soffrono l'obesità, il troppo mangiare e un'alimentazione squilibrata. Ecco, questi grandi paradossi racchiudono uno dei più importanti, forse temi legati a questo equilibrio della food security e della food safety. Disponibilità di cibo, ma anche maggiore consapevolezza, una educazione al cibo, un'educazione alimentare. Pensate, l'Europa adesso si sta affacciando con un nuovo regolamento proprio sul tema dell'educazione alimentare, un primo timido tentativo di iniziare dalle scuole per cercare di far capire che questo non è un tema come un altro, ma è la sfida dell'umanità. Le fiammate di prezzo che abbiamo avuto nella crisi del 2008 e 2009 ce l'hanno fatto capire. Adesso stiamo vivendo una fase di prezzi bassi, anzi abbiamo visto le manifestazioni i giorni scorsi degli agricoltori a Bruxelles molto arrabbiati proprio perché i prezzi sono bassi, ma è una fase congiunturale, c'è una crisi internazionale, c'è un calo dei consumi dovuti a questa crisi, c'è un aumento di produzione dovuto anche a effetti legati a scelte europee, penso al latte in Europa, ma c'è un motore che comunque brucia sotto e che è dovuto all'aumento del reddito pro capite. Il vero motore dei cambiamenti delle diete alimentari è la crescita del reddito pro capite, e la Cina, come sapete, anche se ha ridotto le stime di crescita, viaggia intorno al 7% di aumento del PIL anche quest'anno, e quindi un'ulteriore spinta, una omologazione delle diete che porterà a ulteriori squilibri. E allora in queste condizioni ecco che bastano pochi fatti, un cambiamento climatico che ti può portare, una condizione climatica che ti può portare a un crollo di produzione in un paese, o la decisione incauta di qualche paese di mettere delle tasse all'export, l'abbiamo visto, sembra un assurdo, ma invece molti paesi del mondo l'hanno dovuto fare, perché tassare le esportazioni è il modo più semplice per tenere bassi i prezzi all'interno del proprio paese, ma questo moltiplica gli squilibri internazionali, moltiplica l'aumento del prezzo internazionale e quindi moltiplica che cosa? Ahimè, moltiplica le guerre, moltiplica i problemi della caccia alle risorse naturali. Da qui un altro grande tema che è sempre legato a questo equilibrio mondiale, il tema dell'accaparramento delle risorse naturali, perché se le risorse sono scarse e la gente ha paura, si va ad accaparrare queste risorse. Dove si va? Nell'unica parte del mondo disponibile, l'Africa. È lì che si stanno scatenando gli acquisti o gli affitti di terra, è lì che si stanno scatenando questi squilibri da cui noi vorremmo, attraverso questa grande sfida che lancia oggi l'Emilia-Romagna, prendere diciamo, delle iniziative, delle azioni sulla Global Food Policy Initiative, cioè iniziative di politiche alimentari globali. Quindi ricerca, trasferimento di conoscenza, ma soprattutto continuare nell'opera dell'Expo, cioè di accrescere la consapevolezza. Ecco, qui ci sono i 4 feeding e ho finito, cioè il tema dell'Expo è Feeding the Planet, ma feeding non solo diciamo uno slogan, ma anche un tentativo di dare una risposta a questi quattro alimentazioni. Dobbiamo alimentare la conoscenza e le best practices. E qui c'è tutto il tema, per esempio, dello spreco, no? Alimentare le buone pratiche. In un mondo così come lo stiamo descrivendo non è più tollerabile i livelli di spreco alimentare a cui assistiamo. Attenzione, sprecano tutti nel mondo, non accusiamo solo noi occidentali sprechiamo nella parte finale della catena alimentare, nella parte della distribuzione del cibo, ma il resto del mondo più povero spreca nella parte iniziale della catena, spreca proprio nella fase agricola, la mancanza della catena del freddo, eccetera. Quindi il tema di alimentare le pratiche, le buone pratiche, è uno dei grandi temi, che naturalmente bisogna però che ci sia una politica globale per farli conoscere queste buone pratiche. Dobbiamo alimentare le opportunità for sustainable agribusiness. La parola sostenibilità in questa chiave assume un significato molto diverso da cui eravamo abituati, non è più solo la sostenibilità intesa in senso ecologico puro, certo ecologico, ma il problema è che noi a questa parola sostenibilità oggi dobbiamo attribuire un carattere di gestione delle risorse naturali in maniera sostenibile, cioè come fare in sostanza a produrre di più ma aumentando la fertilità o quantomeno mantenendo la fertilità del terreno. E qui i ricercatori stanno lavorando in tutto il mondo, pensate che cosa potrà essere se riusciranno davvero a far fissare l'azoto atmosferico non solo nelle leguminose ma anche nelle graminacee. Sarebbe una innovazione che porterebbe a milioni di tonnellate di nitrati nel mondo di meno e quindi un impatto ambientale straordinario, oltre che di risparmio per tutto il mondo, diciamo, dell'inquinamento che provoca. Quindi stiamo parlando di filoni straordinariamente importanti, non sempre diamo però l'importanza, e perciò il World Food Forum vuole proprio cercare di continuare questo tasso di consapevolezza, che ovviamente è anche feeding social responsibility, cioè la capacità di aumentare il senso della responsabilità sociale. Tutti, non solo i politici, non solo le grandi istituzioni internazionali, ma tutti, ciascuno di noi può dare un contributo, perché il tema dello spreco ne è un esempio, per cercare di gestire meglio le scarse risorse che abbiamo a disposizione. In qua c'è tutto il tema dell'uso della terra per la produzione di energia. Pensate, questi pannelli fotovoltaici ne vorremmo vedere sempre di meno, ma certamente c'è un tema di gestione delle risorse. E quindi, per ultimo, Feeding the Expo Legacy, cioè appunto la sfida di continuare questi grandi temi che oggi l'Expo ha sollevato e che ha aumentato la consapevolezza mondiale. Noi vorremmo ogni 2 anni fare una sorta di stato dell'arte della ricerca e dell'innovazione, e per questo abbiamo chiamato tutti i ricercatori, partendo ovviamente dall'Unione Europea, ma arrivando poi negli Stati Uniti e in tutto il mondo, che ci aiutino a guardare a questa grande sfida con un pochino più di ottimismo, ma anche però con il senso di responsabilità che ci deve accomunare tutti. Grazie davvero a tutti, buon lavoro, e a questo punto, oltre che a ringraziare ancora la Regione Emilia-Romagna per questa sfida, passerei la parola al collega Fabio Fava per gestire la prima parte degli interventi. Grazie ancora.
Grazie molte e buongiorno a tutti voi. I wish to ask to our distinguished speakers to take the seat here. Thank you. We move to the technical session now. So please, Professor Knorr and Verhagen and Professor Wissel who already reached us. So thank you very much, distinguished President Bonaccini, distinguished Deputy Commissioner Grillo, and distinguished Chair De Castro. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you, and very, very welcome to the first scientific technical session of this particular event, session focused on the contribution of research and innovation for a global sustainable food and nutrition security and safety. I was introduced already. I'm Fabio Fava from the School of Engineering of the University of Bologna, and really very pleased, very honored to have had the privilege to chair this preliminary and first session and to welcome you today. So it was very well mentioned by Professor De Castro in its talk. A number of issues are threatening food security and safety in different areas of our planet. Research and innovation can surely contribute to developing a solution targeted for increasing productivity, sustainability, and safety at all stages of the food chain, from the primary production to the formulation of safe and healthy diets. Research and innovation can also provide the scientific, technical knowledge required to resolve inherent trade-off impacting on the societal choices. Think about the intensive production that we want from one hand, and the sustainability on the environmental level that we want to the other level. So science and technology can help us to solving these conflicts, as well as to underpin good and robust policies in the sectors. According to the experts of the scientific technical World Food Forum panels that we mobilized during the last 3-4 months, 3 are the major challenges, the grand challenges to be faced through tailored research and innovation action to ensure a global and durable sustainable food and nutrition security and safety. The first one is to increase the primary production yields from the current agricultural, livestock, fishery and aquaculture, but at the same time reducing the environmental impact and increasing resilience to the climate change. There is also the need to develop new agricultural landscapes via rural and marginal land development, integrated land use planning, by boosting urban farming, boosting marine aquaculture and horticulture, as an example. The second challenge is to minimize raw material losses and food wastage through the entire food chain via longer range agricultural planning, demanding and forecasting, but also and in particular through a more efficient processing, smarter packaging, smarter supply and distribution chain logistics. The latter are, in addition, very important for improving food safety and quality. There is also the need to push the reuse, the exploitation of food processing byproducts for making ingredients and new food products. The third challenge is to enhance food safety and quality by lowering the occurrence of chemical, microbial, and biological contaminants all along the whole food chain. And it's very important also to improve the availability of healthy, safe, and nutritionally improved foods, both traditional and novel foods. It is very important to promote healthy diets via science-based, once again, science-based information education on the beneficial and adverse health effect of foods and on the nexus, diet, lifestyle, and health. The main research and innovation action to be taken to address these three major challenges will be presented and discussed in the frame of the three talks that we have in the program. The first one will be on the research and innovation technology priorities for improving and making more sustainable primary production. It will be delivered by Professor Richard Visser from Wageningen University. Few information on his background, quite robust background, I can say, in the sector. He studied biology at the State University of Groningen. After obtaining his PhD degree in plant genetics, he joined Wageningen University, where he's professor and head of Wageningen plant breeding unit. He has 30 years of experience as a researcher in the field of genetics and genomics of crop plants, where he published over 400 international publications. He's a member of academic board of Wageningen University, a member of the board of the Top 10 Horticulture and Propagation Materials Initiative, and also the Foundation Virtual Lab for Plants Breeding, both placed in the Netherlands. So, Professor Visser, please continue. The floor is yours, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the organizers for this invitation. It's good to start with, let's say, the basis of food, because if you have primary production, then in the end you will have food. And without primary production, there will be no food. What I will try to do in a couple of slides is to go through plant breeding in general terms, tell you something about, let's say, the developments which are occurring at the moment, and then give you one example in how plant breeding, together with other things, can, let's say, improve the production and also decrease the decrease the environmental impact and improve the sustainability. So if you look at breeding, then I also always consider it as part of the solving of the problem. It's not the only thing. Food research is not the only solution to the food problem. It is very crucial to see that the available biodiversity is used at its fullest, and that is currently not happening. And there is a lot of talk about all kind of different techniques which are used. And I list here a few of the crops we know. Maybe not as a plant, but definitely as a product we consume or eat. There is a big difference in breeding for self-fertilizing crops and for cross-pollinating crops. And in that sense, it is also very important to know what kind of new technologies and what kind of new techniques you can use and are allowed to use. And if you see what kind of techniques are being used throughout history, let's say the last 100 years, then you can say that they always have been aimed at, let's say, improving and increasing the variability which is available, and making new varieties which are resistant to certain diseases and pests. And in many cases, those techniques are in certain crops very well developed, and in other crops not used at all. What you can see nowadays is that there are quite a lot of what is considered new techniques. But remember, what is new in one crop might be very ancient already in another crop. So it's all, let's say, from the point of perspective where you're looking at. But a lot of these techniques, as listed here, I hope this works. No, it doesn't work. A lot of these techniques are being used and are opening up possibilities to improve the efficiency of breeding, and that is very important. To increase the efficiency of breeding, that is one of the major drivers, because nowadays if you have a normal breeding program, you start with about 100 or 200,000 seedlings, and in the end of the day, after 4 or 10 years or 15 years, you hope to be left with one variety only. And then that variety has to become a success in the market as well. Well, that is a very inefficient system, and what we are trying to do is to improve this efficiency. Well, if you look at new technologies, new innovations, then they are quite normal in breeding. Breeding is a very innovative field of research. And we can see that some of these new techniques are as a kind of response to the GMO discussion, mainly in Europe, maybe not in other parts of the world. And it is very clear that these new techniques are very interesting and very useful in especially those kind of crops which are cross-pollinating and vegetatively propagated. And quite a number of crops we are eating and using, they are cross-pollinating and they are vegetatively propagated. What we also can see is that in the end of the day, these newer techniques are quite difficult to, let's say, assess or prove in the end product. And that's one of the reasons why there is a lot of debate on which of these techniques are now falling under GM laws or not. Well, by law in Europe they are, but how are you going to prove it? How are you going to check for the availability or the presence of these kind of newer techniques in these new products? So there are a lot of challenges for the future, and breeding can be part of that solution of all these problems. We have to feed many more people. 9 billion is the magic number mentioned all the time in 2050, but clear is that there will be many more people. We have also to ensure that there are more crops which are climate resilient, because there is a climate change, and it means that we have to ensure that the crops of the future are able to cope with those changing environments. We need to have less inputs, less water, less fertilizers, etc., but maximum outputs. Of course, health and bio-based products are also very important, and most for all, the environmental impact should be much lower than it is nowadays. So what we like to do, and we have now a number of projects in this area, is to link precision breeding, as I call it, and I will tell you what it is, to precision farming. Here is one of the slides you can find on the internet and many publications, where there are projections that with the current way of producing foods, we will not be able to, let's say, come up with the yields we need in 2050. Another picture, more or less telling the same, is that most of the agricultural areas we use nowadays will be facing dramatic yield losses in the future if climate goes the way it is predicted. So knowledge is highly necessary, and in breeding we want to know things about yield stability, yield adaptation, tolerance, resistance, etc., etc. Because, as I said, there are more people, we have less soil, less earth to grow our crops on, and we need better foods for all kinds of things. So in that sense, the concept of precision breeding is set up, and that means that we want to design high-yielding crops which have an excellent quality and have stable yields in no matter what kind of environments you put them, and they will have do that in a sustainable fashion. And it means that you can design behind the computer for environment X your trait which you would like to have, and then based on a cross, you don't need 100,000 seedlings, you can maybe do with 20 or 25. And you can for sure get 4 or 5 good varieties out of that. Of course, there will still have to be a success in the market, but that's another thing. So make use of all the knowledge we have, because there is a lot of knowledge known, but we cannot simply use all that knowledge anymore. And the efficiency, therefore, of obtaining elite varieties, that should be improved and increased, and that is possible. So I have now an example in the last few slides about potato and late blight as a let's say, first step into that direction. What we try to do is to come to durable resistance, and we have over the last 10 years proven that this concept works. We want to use less, let's say, plant protection chemicals, a nicer word maybe for all the pesticides. And we want to do that also using new integrated pest management approaches. And it, of course, in the end, needs to be linked to intelligent farming systems, but that is the next step. So potato is a very important crop, as you may know, and it's one of the crops which the FAO has predicted that will grow in the future even more and will be grown even wider than it is today. But there are a lot of problems, and one of the major problems worldwide is late blight. And it is estimated that losses caused by late blight globally are about 10 billion euros yearly. So the enormous amount of money. It's caused by this oomycete shown here on this slide. It's the literal translation is plant destructor. So within 1 week it can kill your entire crop if you don't have resistant varieties or if you don't spray in time. If you look to the Netherlands as a situation, and I think that is very comparable to a lot of Western countries, we use in the Netherlands 12 to 15 sprays per season, about 1,400 tons of active ingredients per year. 50% of all the biocides in the Netherlands are due to late blight. And so it's a big environmental health toll, although the used chemicals are of course tested and safe, etc., but still there is an enormous impact. And if you estimate the costs, then you come down to only for Europe, for the Netherlands, 150 million euros a year. So an enormous amount of money. There are resistances known in nature, and one of the things we did in the past, or my colleagues did in the past, my predecessors, is taking one resistant gene at a time, putting it in a variety, and then see that this variety or this new resistant variety doesn't survive many years. So one of the ideas is to try and pyramid many genes together in one variety. And as shown here, in the middle you can see Bintje, a variety completely wiped out, and there are still some varieties, or still some wild species, which are standing. So this is in the picture of my predecessor, Professor Hermsen. He started already almost in the age I was born to cross and try to make a variety which is more resistant to late blight. So it took him about, let's say, 35 years to get to a certain level. Then it was turned over to the companies, and they were able to create varieties from that. In 2005, 2 varieties were put on the market, Toluca and Bionica, so after, let's say, 45 years of breeding, containing 1 resistant gene. Well, 3 years later already in the field, we knew that they were broken. So you spend 40 plus years in breeding, and within a few years, your whole effort is gone. So that we have to change that. It has to be done in a different way. So what we learned from this is that, yes, there are very good resistance genes, and their levels of resistance are very high. You don't want to use a single R gene because that's quickly overcome, so you need to combine different R genes. And that is in fact the way how in nature the wild species survive in the Andes. They contain, as a population, many different resistance genes in all kinds of different combinations. So there's always one, let's say, plant which will survive. So what we want to do is to introduce these kind of genes in normal breeding programs, but also by using marker-assisted selection nowadays, you would be able to do it faster, let's say maybe 20 years instead of 40, but still that is a very long time. So one of the approaches is to use genetic modification. We all know how public perception of genetic modification is in Europe. But I think especially for vegetatively propagated crops like potato, like apple and many, many more, this is one of the most strong forward ways to try and improve the crops. So if you see this, then you know, I showed you earlier, it takes about 40 years in normal breeding to get the variety. We've done it by using cisgenesis approach, which is also a GM approach, and it took us 4 years to go from a variety which has a good performance, everything is known about it, to a variety which has resistance. We use cisgenesis because it's a natural gene from crossable species. We use what is actually present in the breeder's gene pool, so we're not doing anything else than normally in breeding. And what is very important in these kind of crops, we maintain the elite variety. We don't lose it. If you start breeding, you lose your varieties. You cannot go to the same variety back again. Well, this is just an example of an approach where we did for 2 of the genes combined in a stack, and then you can end up indeed at the end of the day from about 4,000 explants to 4 plants, so 0.1%. Not a high efficiency, but you can get it, and you have then 4 plants which show resistance and are still the varieties. Yes. So this is how it looks like. 2007, all the testing, PCR analysis going from, let's say, 4,000 explants to 4 plants. 2008, multiplying the plants in the screenhouse, doing the tests to see which ones are really resistant, then multiplying the material further and doing field experiments in 2010 and onwards. This is the way it looks like, and you can already see Desiree Plus, which contains the resistance genes, is nicely standing, and the Desiree, the normal one, is submerging to the disease. Nope, too fast. Yep. So this is another picture where we tested about 10 different varieties, and it works in all, some better, some less. And you can see in the left untreated field, in the middle the cisgenic plants, not treated further, and on the right the chemical protection at very low doses. And this is a PR for cisgenesis, but of course if you take better and more chemicals you would be able to get similar yields. Well, this is what it looks like in the field, and it all works out quite fine. Well, that's one part of the picture. The other part is that you want to deploy your genes and your plants in a much better way than we do nowadays. So you want to make sure that you stack your R genes in what we call a dynamic cultivar, or even that you mix different transformed plants into mixed cultivars. But then you also have to make sure that your disease is monitored in a proper way. So we need to know how the disease is developing, which isolates are floating around, and which ones are causing a problem and which not. Because in the end of the day, the field which is broken by the disease will generate millions and millions of spores, billions of spores, and the mutation rate there is so high that you can just wait for your gene to be broken. So this is one of the final slides on where we combine the use of the new plants with the integrated pest management new system. And it's a pity that the pointer doesn't work, but the first 3 columns are on the Desiree, which is not transformed. Then in the middle you have a Sarpomira, which is a normally bred variety which contains at least 5 different resistance genes. And then the A15 is the cisgenic transformant. And if you look at the middle column strategy, then you can see no control or a weekly schedule of spraying or the IPM 2.0. And what that means is that we go out, let's say, according to the information we have about the isolates, about the buildup of the disease, and then we spray with less dosage. So in the end of the day, 5% is being considered as acceptable of infection, and you see both in the Sarpomira and in the A15 that you can get that very easily by using not even 1 full spray in the whole season. So that's very valuable and very useful, and that you should integrate in a much wider way, because that will ensure that also your resistance genes are not burned down so quickly. So some of the conclusions from this: we have used cisgenesis, but many other techniques are available, and it should be allowed to use those kind of techniques for modifying and trying to improve the efficiency of breeding, trying to get much better varieties. It is also possible then to do it if legislation and all kind of things are easier. It would allow in smaller crops also to do these kind of things, because nowadays it's only possible for large companies, multinationals, to do these kind of things because of the costs. And then if we combine the breeding with all kind of other techniques like integrated pest management, then we can see that we get to durable, stable, high yields. And finally, of course, the available techniques are nice, but we don't want to use the techniques simply because they're there. We want to use the techniques for those crops where we know that they will have most impact. This is where I would like to stop. These are some people who worked mainly on the potato part, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Visser, for your quite effective talk with interesting example, quite effective. Thank you very much. We do not have time for questions. I apologize. The discussion can continue with the speakers during the lunchtime. We don't have any alternative. So I wish to ask to Professor Noor to reach the podium. And now the topic is research and innovation for improving sustainability in the food processing and reduction of byproducts and exploitation, potential exploitation of byproduct. This very important talk will be delivered by Professor Noor, who is the president of European Federation of Food Science and Technology. He received engineering degree and PhD in food and fermentation technology from the University of Agriculture in Vienna. He was a research associate at the same university, and then he worked as a visiting scientist at Berkeley, Cornell University, Reading University, and then he was then associated professor, full professor, and acting chair at the University of Delaware, where he kept the position of research professor, and then he moved to Europe, food professor, head of the department of food biotechnology, food processing, engineering at the Technical University of Berlin. Since August 2014, Professor Noor is the president-elect of the International Union for Food Science and Technology. So thank you very much. The floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for reminding me of my life. Let me set the stage, and I think this is very important, and also in the context of the previous speakers. Keep in mind that every 3 weeks we basically eat the same amount as the equivalent of our food and the same amount of drink, which accumulates to 1.5 tons of food and drink per year. And if you multiply with the number we just heard, I think it becomes very clear. The pointer doesn't work, so I point out. And the United Nations, because of this issue, the United Nations identified as the 17 key global goals, and number 2 is hunger, number 3 is good health, and number 6 is clean water. And these are the most important ones, are food related, and then you have number 13, number 14, number 15, and another one. So if you say 6 of the 17 devoted to food, it clearly shows the importance. Now, in the European technology platform Food for Life, they created what we call something very radical. Rather than adapting the raw materials to the processes as we did in the past, we are now saying we need to adapt the technologies to the needs, the preferences, and the acceptance of the consumers. And this is a radical change because we are now changing the technologies. We are looking into soft, gentle, high-quality technologies, and that's what I will talking about. How do we reach the food and water security? And this is one of the reasons why I'm here. And again, we heard in the previous presentations, increase production, GMOs, you heard the answer. Alternative sources I will get into. We also heard today already increase resource and efficiency, reduce waste, and this is converting waste into biomass, which could be food, and you will see in a second what I mean.
The most important thing, I believe, is the social point, and the overall chairman this morning indicated, because we need to teach the consumers, our children, to have respect of food, that this is a valuable deteriorates raw material that perishes very easily, and that we don't throw 50% of our food away. Also, I will come to the cooking losses. And then what Nestle calls so nicely satiety management, reduce intake, and I think this is also what we can do in the food technology area. Just to indicate the issue of food wastes. In developing countries, most of this is the top line, the pointer, as I said, doesn't work, the top line, most of the waste goes lost in the farm and at the post-harvest areas. So this means losses. In the developed countries, over 50% of the food is lost at the store level, after the store level, and in the households. And this is clearly where we need to change, and this is clearly where also technology can play a role. I listed here, and it's too complicated, all the technologies we have available to combat waste losses. But if you go to the very last two lines, you see that emerging technologies are everywhere, and that's what I will concentrate on. I just wanted to sidetrack and tell you how important the waste issue is also for this expo event. It turns out that 4 chefs will basically convert waste foods into, as they call it, luxury meals. And I don't know whether they still do it, but I thought it's quite interesting. So where do we go? What do we need to do? We need, and clearly I'm a strong believer in food chain integration. We need to deal with land use, and we need to understand why are these tremendous differences between land use. And we all were aware that the United States but that Britain and Denmark are so highly different, even in Europe. This is something we need to figure out and identify why is it. Alternative raw materials. We have this, what everybody calls the yuck factor in Europe, but keep in mind that 2 billion of people have been eating insects worldwide. And if you look at the left one, that's how far I can see. The CO2 global warming effect of insects is much, much lower than anything else, and also the land use is much lower. So clearly here an argument for insects, and when you go, and there is in the Netherlands, there are quite a lot of activity already, and when you go to the very right side, protein content at the bottom, there is cattle, maximum 26, and you see some of the insects are doing very, very well. Food at home waste, and we always thought we are not contributing to the global warming effect. The 4.4 tons CO2 equivalent is in the United States driving cars. The 8.1 is waste in the household. And so I think this is clearly something to think about. Water, one of the issues. I just want to point out that of the total amount of water we have, only 2.5% is fresh water, and out of this, only about 1% is easily accessible. So it's the most valuable future food we have on Earth, and that's why using it carefully and respectfully is also a very important issue, and designing technologies to recover water again and reuse it are very essential. Just to give you a figure, that's the land use. Agriculture is using water, the amount of water, and the drought in California this year makes it very clear. This is the amount of water used to process raw materials and products, maize. So plants are clearly much, much lower than animal products. Clear message here. And then something which also important, I personally feel very important, Wheeler and Van Braun in science, climate change will affect the populations and the countries which are already suffering hunger. It will affect food inequalities, and it will also increase food insecurity. So here again, something we need to all work together. transport. We're just discovering that transport is chaotic, and improving transportation in the food area. Many products go back and forth to Asia or somewhere and to Europe again, needs to be improved. So here on the right side, you see, I strongly believe that integration of the food chain is the most important thing we need to do. So we all need to work from plant breeding to food waste at the end of the table. I put this blue book here because I wrote it 30 years ago. At that time, more than 30 years, at that time nobody cared. Probably 30 copies were sold. Now I should probably reprint it. But the point I tried to make, I said in the introduction, systematic attempts to explore existing methods and to develop new technology of more sustainable food production system have so far been scarce, and unfortunately this still holds. So clearly need for action, and that's why I feel this initiative is very important. Just to give you an example, what we in food processing and engineering need to do. These are stoves, many hundreds of millions of stoves worldwide. In countries where there is no raw material for burning, cow dung is used. The energy efficiency of these stoves is somewhere between 10 and 20%. This publication, I think, is 95. It's 20 years old. Nothing happened. So my future foods, my mode of action, graveyard mining is a new terminology going back to old technologies. We have yeast proteins, single-cell proteins, leaf protein concentrates. During my postdoc years in Berkeley and at Cornell, we worked on that already. It failed because the technologies to permeabilize membranes were not there. We have them now. Underutilized resources, chitin, the second most abundant compound on Earth. I will come to the new technologies. So these are the new technologies. This is the non-thermal. Don't worry about the busy slide. Fermentation is one which is established. Irradiation is something that is not accepted in Europe. High pressure, pulsed electric field, and plasma. They're all completely different, but these are the emerging non-thermal, gentle, high-quality processes that can achieve some of the things we can do in the future. And just to show you, these are the recent development out of our lab. This is an industrial installment now, and 30 industrial units have been sold. For permeabilization of membrane. That's what pulse electric field do. They permeabilize any biological membrane. It's interesting that we are also interaction with medical people. We are permeabilizing potatoes. They are permeabilizing cancer cells. So quite a value difference. Energy-wise, that's what you need to permeabilize any plant tissue. And pulsed electric field are on the very right side, the lowest one. So when you consider how cheap the energy source for these technologies, it becomes clear why it is attractive, and you can permeabilize and consequently increase mass transfer, reduce drying cost, and so on. Another one, to improve the quality of food, is if we stress the plants with electric fields, we can increase Italian wine, but also waste product, waste pomace, grape pomace, and press cakes, can treat them and can increase the polyphenol content up to almost 30%. And these polyphenols have been proven by a colleague in the United States that they have an effect on breast cancer cell reduction. So here I think the circle is closed. Plasma, another technology, we are working, we are basically, this is ionized gases, it's available in nature, northern lights is gases, and we are using that to reduce microorganisms, but at the same time we make sure that the plants that are being used, it's a surface decontamination method, are being protected. Insects are being treated now in order to make sure that there are no microbial contamination. During further processing, we do surface contamination of insects with these technologies. And then I come to one point which is extremely important, and it should show how important the diet is for you. And this is basically, and everybody is developing now, discovering now microbiota, which means the gut microorganism. So if you're eating a regular diet, that's how it looks on the left side, the two bottom curves. If you eat no meat and no vegetable, if you eat a no vegetable, and fruit meal, you see how they changes, and one of the bacteriocytes go up. They are responsible for obesity, the other one go down, and they are responsible for the bowel syndrome. So I think the message of diet and the relationship of diet and health are very, very clear. So it is important to increase the quality of the microorganisms we are getting. These are the fermented yogurts the products you are getting. Everybody has been concentrating on probiotics and prebiotics. We also did, and by increasing the temperature, I'm almost done, by stressing them with high pressure, we can increase the temperature resistance by inducing stress proteins, and consequently we can spray dry them rather freeze drying, which requires freeze drying requires 100,000 kilojoule to remove 1 kilogram of water. With spray drying you need only 5,000. So the energy savings is quite obvious. This is high hydrostatic pressure, just that you understand. It is water. Usually water is used, pressure from all sides. At the deepest point of the ocean, 11 kilometers, you would have 110 megapascals. We are using, or industry is using, up to about 600 megapascals. There are 300 industrial units out there. In the last 20 years, this has been developed. We were also quite responsible. So interesting now, I really believe on interdisciplinary work. We all need to work together, not only in the food area, also with other area. And this is the Institute of Chemical Engineering. These are chemical engineers in the UK. And their key challenges they published are energy, food and nutrition, health and well-being, water. This could be something a food scientist could have written, so clearly they understand the topics. So the key message now, the final message is, and that's the United Nations Zero Hunger Challenge. They also indicate that we need to work together, and as the very right issue here shows, the waste basket, we also need to work very, very close together to try to solve the waste issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your nice talk, very comprehensive, clear overview on what we have to do in the sustainability area. So now we move to the third talk, which is focused on food safety, but in particular on functional foods and novel foods. Professor Hans Verhagen, Senior Scientist, Scientific Advisor on Nutrition and Food Safety, National Institute of Public Health and Environment from the Netherlands, will cover this topic. He studied at the University of Nijmegen, and then in Paris and Maastricht. He worked at TNO and Unilever. His current interests are health claims, integrated benefit risk, novel food, food safety, food additives, food fortifications, etc., etc. And since 2009, he's visiting professor at the University of Ulster. He was one of the most prominent members of the EFSA NDA panel for many years, and then from November 1st, 2015, he will be the head of risk assessment and scientific assistant department at the European Food Safety Authority. So thank you very much for being here. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Oops. Yes, you can hear me. Okay. I will talk about functional foods and novel foods in particular. And let's first take a little look back into the future. 20,000 years ago here in Italy and Europe, we had a very simple food problem. When we were hungry, we went out to hunt a mammoth and we had sufficient food for ages already. Over the years, we learn to handle our foods in a little different way. We kept storing it and preparing it, cooking for one another. And nowadays, life is very simple. You go to the shop, you go to an abundance where you can buy an abundance as food as these people are doing there. By coincidence, my family, not by coincidence, my family. And in the future, it will change. I think the relevance of this meeting is that in the future, it will be different. I'm a nutritionist, I'm also a toxicologist, and I like to see where nutrition and food contributes to public health. So, this is better? Yeah, okay, and I should not drop off. This is a picture by the World Health Organization indicating what people in the world die from. And I will not go through it in detail, but if you can look at some point detail, is that you see that nutrition, food, one way or another, is associated with diet and health and disease in a very, very relevant way. And you can see that many of the top-ranking issues in food and in diet and health are associated with food. It also means that if you want to improve public health, if you want to improve health, there is a solution in the diet. So that is the relevance of food and diet. But food and diet is also complicated. Sometimes I have the impression that everybody is an expert in food. And of course, there's an abundance here available in the expo in Milano. Everybody is an expert. Yes, but, or maybe not. So sometimes I think that food is like playing soccer. You have the Italian team here, we have the Dutch team in the Netherlands, and we're all experts. Okay, it works a little bit different. Let's start it from the scientific perspective. This is more or less an overview of our traditional diet, or eggs, or bread, or fruits, or vegetables, etc. Of course, this is still valid, but there is more to food now, and that brings me to my presentation, because there's also, within the totality of food area, there is novel foods and there's functional foods. And please do discern them, because they're completely different. And that's what I'll tell you. With respect to novel foods are foods that have not been on the market prior to a significant degree in May 1997. And there's a regulation in Europe, the 258/1997, etc. Novel foods need to be evaluated for safety. And novel foods is only a safety issue. Functional food, in contrast, are there only for health claims. And I will elaborate on both novel foods and health claims. They are completely different. So in Europe, functional foods are evaluated for claims only. And now we have the new overview of foods in Europe and also in the world. We have the common foods, we have the novel foods, we have the functional foods. Sometimes there may be an overlap. There is some products on the market that are both novel as well as functional. And the most relevant or most well-known example there is the plant sterols known for blood cholesterol lowering. And I will elaborate a little bit more what needs to be done from a scientific perspective, because I'm a scientist. With respect to novel foods, the first focus, I'll give you some examples of what are novel foods here in Europe. And I see a lot of people making pictures, etc. The presentation is available as a PDF without any problem. Just ask me. And maybe also on the website. Okay, novel foods. Some examples of successful food introductions in Europe in the past are the plant sterols, phytosterols, lycopene, the coloring agent in tomato, produced via another route, Blackslea, Pterospora, synthetic, etc. Noni fruits, seed oils from Alamblachia, synthetic zeaxanthin, ice-structuring proteins isolated from fish and brought into ice cream, and so on and so on. There's several dozen of novel food introductions, and I have the impression that this number increases. With respect to the legislation, there is a couple of categories of novel foods, and these are actually initially GMO, as identified already in the first lecture this morning, were part of the novel food regulation. These are out now. They have their own separate regulation with the same critical and scientific stance. Then there's foods with new or intentional modified primary molecular structure, foods consistent of or isolated from microorganisms or fungi or algae, foods consisting or derived from plants or animals, and foods for which a new production process has been applied. Okay, all these are novel foods and need to go through a safety testing. Then you have classes, which is either pure chemicals, simple mixtures, or complex novel foods, or novel processes. Okay, when you want to have a novel food on the market, and this links with innovation, there's always many new products intended for market. Industry is investing a lot, etc., which I think is a very good thing. But in order to introduce it to the European market, the US market, Australian market, and many more places in the world, you need to secure that the intake is safe. So the actual goal of a novel food application is to establish that the novel food or the novel food ingredient is safe under the proposed conditions of use. And I think that's a fair issue in Europe and also elsewhere in the world. Thy food shall be safe. In practice, it means that you have to convince an evaluation body, which in Europe is typically the European Food Safety Authority, not so far away from here in Parma. Taking me back to the earlier picture, it's the same one as before. We have common foods, we have the novel foods to be evaluated for safety only, and we have the functional food to be evaluated for efficacy only. Also a bit back in history, this is a picture of, let's say, 15, 20 years ago here in Europe, many places in the world, we have fantastic foods. You go to the shop and you buy the food that melts your body fat overnight. Would not want that. Or extend your life, or increase your performance, or superfoods, or antioxidants, etc. There was an abundance of materials on the market. Not so true, although. So at some point in time, Europe realized very, very correctly that not every claim may be true, may be outrageous, etc. So they published in the end, after years and years of debate, Regulation 1924-2006, which is on health and nutrition claims made on foods. One of these paragraphs in this regulation said that health claims should be authorized for use in the European community after a scientific assessment of the highest possible standard. So health claims should be scientifically substantiated, and I think that's a very good thing. Health claim evaluation is done in Europe, and that's also in the regulation by the European Food Safety Authority. This is a very nice place, not so far from here. I think about a 1.5 hours drive south of Milano. Very beautiful city, and the EFSA building is to the right there, and that will also be my new office, at least part of it. EFSA does evaluate health claims. EFSA did slightly over 3,000 health claim applications hitherto, which is an enormous amount. And I was happy to be involved in all of them. When there is a dossier being evaluated by EFSA, EFSA answers three main questions first. So it asks the question, the extent to which the food or the food constituent is defined or characterized. Do you know what the food is, what the compound is? Do we know how the microorganism looks like? If no, a health claim cannot be supported. The second question, is the claimed effect beneficial to human health? If it's not beneficial to human health, it cannot be a health claim. It's good for maybe something, but certainly not for health. And finally, it should be indicated that a cause and effect relationship has been established. And you should realize, with respect to functional foods and health claims in Europe, that a negative answer in any of these three steps stops the further process. So if you cannot say yes, 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 stop. Then the health claim cannot be supported. This system now works in Europe and is eagerly looked upon by also many other places in the world. But I think Europe is leading, certainly, in this area. The outcome of an evaluation process by EFSA is threefold. And you already see the traffic light here. The answer can be, yes, you're lucky, a cause and effect relationship has been established. Or, not so lucky, there is insufficient evidence for a cause and effect relationship, or, and that is in the large majority of the cases, sorry, but a cause and effect relationship has not been established. It is not exactly the same as it is not existing or not true, but there's just no scientific evidence that supports the health claim. So then in Europe, it's no go. In Europe, only claims are authorized that have the green light cause and effect relationship established, which in nearly all the cases the Commission will follow the advice from the scientific European Food Safety Authority. This is a general overview of the outcome of a process of more than 3,000 health claim dossier applications. And it's only, let's say, a schematic overview, and you can see that by far the majority of health claims were found got the evaluation not scientifically substantiated. There was a few handful of insufficient scientific evidence, and slightly over 200 had the verdict, yes, a health claim has been scientifically substantiated, slightly over 200. Some examples of health claims where EFSA said, yes, there is sufficient evidence here are, let's say, quite well known. That's what you learn also in school, health claims. Calcium is good for bones, and calcium and vitamin D is also good for bones, particularly in elderly women. Fluoride is good for teeth, magnesium is involved in energy metabolism, the B vitamins are involved in energy metabolism, etc. So it does not come as a surprise that here these health claims did find sufficient evidence also in Europe. On the other hand, there are many health claims that were not supported. For instance, microorganisms, sometimes people prefer the word probiotics. EFSA does not use the word probiotics because it's an implicit health claim. There was no evidence found that they do strengthen the immune system. There was no evidence for more than 100 probiotics that they are sufficiently characterized. So hitherto, not a single claim is supported, except for lactose digestion by yogurt bacteria. And of course, we have yogurt already on the market for ages. In the area of botanicals, more or less the same picture, very poorly characterized, poorly data, although there's about 1,500 health claim dossiers on hold because there's opposition whether or not EFSA should evaluate these health claims. Now, taurine, antioxidants, no evidence, so many without any evidence. If you want to have an overview, there's a very good website from the European Commission. The link is over here. Go there, you can find the information, you can find the verdict, authorized, not authorized, as well as the underlying scientific evaluation by EFSA. A general overview of the health claim evaluation process, inclusive of the decisions by the European Commission. And I have to say that the European Commission, in nearly every instance, they take over the scientific advice from EFSA and authorize or not authorize along with the scientific evaluation. There's only a few deviations. For instance, if salt there is an electrolyte function for sodium. EFSA approved that, but the Commission said, no, we do not want to stimulate the consumption of salt for very obvious reasons. So overall, let's say the outcome is that slightly over 200 are authorized now in Europe. So with respect to innovation, there's a couple of messages that I want to convey to the audience. I think good science is pivotal. Novel foods must be safe, and health claims must be substantiated. EFSA in Europe has a pivotal role in science. And if you want to innovate, please do, but do not look for magic recipes because they don't exist. Fairy tales don't exist in reality. Provide a scientific rationale. And read a lot and prepare. Read Commission guidances, existing EFSA opinions, general EFSA guidelines, guidance documents, and do a lot of thinking. Do your homework. Thank you. That's all what I had to say, and I hope you enjoy.
Thank you very much. Very stimulating talk. And so we are at the end of this first part of the first session of the morning. And I wish to thank sincerely the three speakers, prominent speakers, for their great job. I think that we can conclude by saying that the research and innovation has surely the potential of improving food security and safety in many, many, many countries. Some of the priorities presented here, for sure, are also very relevant for improving food security and safety in developing, emerging countries, where, however, we need other measures. We need to flank this kind of activity with policy, social actions addressed mostly to improve the access to resources by the local small-scale food producer, family farmers, etc., etc. But this is the core topic for the roundtable that which is follow. So I wish to leave the floor to Mr. Roberto Ridolfi, Director for Sustainable Growth and Development at the European Commission's Directorate General for Development and Cooperation, European Commission. So please, Roberto, reach, I think here, I don't know which is the strategy. And thank you to all of you for being here and enjoy your day at the World Food Forum.
Thank you, Fabio. Buongiorno. Dunque, adesso entriamo nel vivo dell'azione. Grazie agli eminenti professori che hanno fatto i key speech prima di noi, io chiamerei sul podio i nostri relatori E comincerei da Palma Costi, Minister for Productive Activities, Energy Plan, Green Economy dell'Emilia Romagna. Assessore, buongiorno. Isabelle de Froidmont-Gertz, Project Officer, DG Research and Innovation of Agri-Food Chain, the European Commission. Bonjour, vous êtes la bienvenue. Anne Tutwiler. Anne Tutwiler is the Director General of Biodiversity International, who is a research center. Good morning, Anne. You are most welcome. Ladislau Martin Neto, Executive Director of the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, Embrapa. Bom dia, senhor. Michela Petronio, Vice President Global Discovery Center, Barilla. Michela, buongiorno e benvenuta. Luigi Bodria, Professore, Department of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, University of Milan, President del Club of Bologna. Buongiorno, Professore. Diana Battaglia, Head of Investment and Technology Promotion Officer, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. Buongiorno. Roger Beachy, Executive Director, World Food Center, University of California, Davis. Good morning and welcome. Shall we give a nice round of applause? Fabio, io prendo la cosa con 10 minuti di ritardo, quindi ve la ridò con 10 minuti di ritardo. Questo è il patto, non vi lamentate se pranzerete 10 minuti più tardi. Now, research and technologies for a sustainable food security and safety in developing emerging economies. This is the title of the roundtable, and I'm very honored to chair this roundtable because it's the first roundtable of the first forum of this platform that is starting today on the first day, so I'm very, very honored. And all the rest will be just the second and third. We are the first. And makes a difference. I am very honored that the first table is on developing emerging countries. After 21 years of my job working for development, I'm only pleased that this will be the first focus, because as it was said already by some colleagues, working in developing countries and regions is essential for the sustainability of the planet. It was already mentioned that the SDGs will trigger new areas for our thinking, for our research, for our elaborations, for your elaboration in the panel. The World Food Research and Innovation Forum is most welcome. I was asking myself, do we need another forum? Do we need another platform? I think the answer is upon you. How good you are in telling this will give the answer to the question. Because a discussion paper was produced under the coordination of Fabio Fava and the other Professor Godefroy. He's here. And this paper is to be elaborated further. I think the round table will give inputs to this paper. I'm sure you will try to identify priorities in that paper, lines of actions, streamline. One only, and this is a tribute to Regione Emilia-Romagna, and to the different ministers, I differenti assessori che hanno partecipato, the tribute is that there is an interest of having a regione, Emilia-Romagna in particular, to take this forward, and this noting in the paper, in the discussion paper, the shared value business models, or le filiere, as we say in Italian, that could be the key of this very forum, or this very platform. What is special about a regione that gives orientation, that gives assistance and policy to business, that gives a certain environment for agribusiness and agriculture to prosper under certain conditions. And this is the concept of filiera, so important in developing countries. And our friends of FIO will tell us about that. So one objective is please to give some lights on this discussion paper with your intervention. The second point is, of course, to give a light on how this discussion around research and innovation can be given, delivered to poor farmers in emerging and developing countries. And this is very, very close to my heart, personally, because sometimes we do finance a lot of research. The European Commission finances the CGIAR system of research in agriculture. Many colleagues here are part or have contributed to it. But we are financing from the development budget. I am responsible for that finance. I put my little signature on that. And I am very, very attached to the fact that that research shall deliver the last inch, the last mile. First of all, getting the input from the farmers. Secondly, elaborating with the due diligence of research. And thirdly, delivering to practical impact. And that is one area that I would stimulate you to cover. My idea, without telling you how much the European Union is doing about food and nutrition, is only 8.8 billion euros of grants in 61 countries. The European Commission and the European Union works on a basis of partnership. So we don't impose what we do with the partner countries. We try to work on what that partner countries wants us to work with. And that is nutrition, that is agribusiness, that is agriculture sustainability. We are launching a big initiative, I think on the 15th and 16th of October here at Expo, which is called AgriFi. AgriFi is a way to provide good patient capital for solid business to prosper and develop. It's very difficult for SMEs in agriculture and agribusiness to find the right kind of finance, because very, very often finance is very short-term and very expensive. And agriculture is affected by many, many externalities, so you need patient capital. That will be AgriFi. But I don't want to bother you too much with what I wanted to say. I will then try to hand over to my speakers here. The idea is that we will do a first round of about 3-4 minutes, and forgive me if I will be rude in reminding you that. Then I would like to pick up some keywords, and I'm sure, Fabio, you will also pick up some keywords from what they say. I will perhaps ask only 2 questions of 10 seconds each to you, so that I can elaborate a second round, and we do an interaction. So the first round, you go as you planned. But be prepared to change your plans with the second round, because myself, Fabio, you have the right to 1 question, and the public the right to 2 10-second questions. We will go with answering to those questions and reacting. Assessore Costi, l'onore è il suo. Prego.
Grazie. Si sente?
No. Sì.
Sì. Grazie. Io sono anche un po' emozionata, ma credo che questo forum internazionale sia un'occasione importante per dare concretezza alla Carta di Milano. Io porto un'esperienza che è quella della regione Emilia-Romagna e che è il frutto di una triangolazione Regione Emilia-Romagna, Italia, Europa. Ecco, noi ci aspettiamo da questo forum, che per noi speriamo sia davvero un forum permanente, e cercheremo di lavorare in questo senso, che gli esperti ci aiutino a capire come sviluppare ulteriormente la nostra azione. Assicurare cibo sano e di qualità su tutto il pianeta, noi crediamo non sia solo un'enunciazione di principio. È un mosaico che a valle è fatto di tanti progetti territoriali di cui io porto la nostra esperienza. L'Emilia-Romagna a monte ha una strategia condivisa, chiaramente con l'Unione Europea, che poggia, cioè che si fonda su 4 pilastri per noi fondamentali. Il primo, grandi investimenti in ricerca ed innovazione, che è il tema, perché questo è, diciamo, un asset che ci può permettere di risolvere grande parte dei problemi che stiamo trattando. Chiaramente un asset che noi abbiamo indirizzato per dare delle risposte nuove ai problemi che per esempio Expo ci sta ponendo. Secondo tema, il trasferimento tecnologico. Noi abbiamo costruito in questa regione un sistema, diciamo, di ricerca, che è quella della rete alta tecnologia, che ci permette di ottenere dei risultati concreti, quindi applicabili anche nei sistemi territoriali e nelle imprese. Un grande investimento sul capitale umano, quindi la formazione per noi, l'educazione e la formazione è l'altro punto straordinariamente importante. Il quarto punto è l'approccio di filiera. Noi siamo in una regione che ha una filiera agroalimentare costruita da cluster di eccellenza internazionale. Abbiamo saputo coniugare la tradizione con l'innovazione, questo ci permette di avere degli alti standard di qualità e soprattutto anche di sicurezza dei prodotti. E poi abbiamo i cluster della meccanica che soprattutto per quanto riguarda l'impiantistica agricola, ma anche il packaging, tutto il tema della conservazione, e anche questi sono fondamentali per avere delle risposte, diciamo, efficaci rispetto ai temi di oggi. Mi permetto di aggiungere un punto, perché la riflessione del rappresentante di EFSA, noi abbiamo anche un sistema sanitario regionale di eccellenza che lavora in collaborazione con noi sui temi della ricerca, quindi il tema della salute, ma lavora anche sui temi della prevenzione. Noi abbiamo un sistema proprio, un programma di prevenzione e per esempio gli stili di vita, dall'alimentazione come si dice, alle modalità, quindi al movimento, allo sport, sono temi per noi eccezionali. Quindi noi oggi possiamo parlare, credo, di cooperazione diciamo perché abbiamo, credo, alle spalle un sistema molto consolidato con dei risultati. Ma per parlare di cooperazione noi ne parliamo a 3 livelli. Il primo, la cooperazione decentrata, che è un lavoro che noi facciamo direttamente con l'ONG e che sviluppiamo con politiche regionali. Abbiamo una legge regionale ad hoc e che si occupa proprio di sostenere progetti concreti rispetto delle comunità locali, diciamo di paesi in via di sviluppo. La cooperazione territoriale, che è quella che noi sviluppiamo soprattutto con l'Unione Europea, ma a noi interessa molto adesso parlare soprattutto della cooperazione tecnologica sulle filiere, il tema del trasferimento tecnologico, che credo che sia la grande sfida che una regione come l'Emilia-Romagna oggi diciamo, può mettere diciamo, in questo nostro forum e, aiutata anche da altri, chiaramente lavorare. Lo dico perché abbiamo degli esempi molto importanti su un tipo di cooperazione. Mi piace portare quello che ha fatto Cefa con Granarolo in Tanzania, dove ha riprodotto la catena del latte, quella che abbiamo costruito in questo meraviglioso territorio, quindi dalla produzione, allevamento fino alla trasformazione, ma mi piace anche portare un altro esempio importante, che è quello che facciamo in India in collaborazione anche con l'università e gli agricoltori, quindi i contadini indiani, dove in un rapporto sinergico con le nostre imprese studiamo al meglio diciamo, i mezzi meccanici che possono essere utilizzati in un paese che ha culture, sistemi, modalità, approcci completamente diversi dai nostri. Quindi crediamo che forti di questa esperienza noi possiamo davvero essere, diciamo, elemento trainante assieme agli altri per sviluppare e trasferire conoscenza, sapere, tecnologia, modalità, impostazione anche in questi paesi.
Grazie, grazie mille. Avrà modo poi di ritornare su questi temi molto molto interessanti. Isabelle, la parola a tua.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to...
Micro.
Sorry. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here today in this round table. Let me briefly present you the vision of the DG Research and how the DG Research will support this very good paper prepared by the World Food Forum. You probably all know the definition of the food security. And at the European Commission, we always include the term nutrition, given the shift in competition for protein, since there can be no food security without nutrition security, and there is no food security without food safety. Then the direction general I work for focus on bringing research to reality through innovation, mainly through funding research and innovation through framework programs. Horizon 2020 is the framework program supporting research and innovation, and is running from 2014 to 2020, and which has received a budget of 80 billion euro. Food and nutrition security is part of the societal challenge too, which is related to food security, sustainable agriculture and forestry, marine and maritime research. From 2014 to 2016, 670 million euro has been and will be spent in 2016 and 17 in the area of nutrition and food and nutrition security. Then to answer this question properly, we must embrace multidisciplinarity and reinforce cooperation across multiple sectors, policy and research area, with the engagement of different stakeholders, including policymaker, industry and researcher, and civil society. Europe needs also to be open to the world, and DG Research and Innovation is already pursuing a major international partnership for the pooling of research funds for more impactful outcome. For example, the EU and Africa high-level policy dialogue, where the EC and African Union are working on the implementation of research and innovation partnership, and the recent published Horizon 2020 call dedicate almost 30 million euro for collaborative research of mutual interest in this area, and this will contribute to lift 500 million people out of poverty by 2030. Now, more closer to Europe, we are currently negotiating the establishment of a joint program with Mediterranean partner country in Europe and also Northern Africa, and it's called PRIMA, and it's on the development and adoption of innovative solutions for food system and water resources in the Mediterranean basin. Another example is the extensive collaborative effort that has been done in the past with China on agriculture and food, and which is now, in fact, the flagship of the work program 2016 and 17. Collaborative research with topics such as urban agriculture, but also plant breeding program to decrease dependency on protein import and soil water resources are proposed in this work program 2016-17. Just then, I just would like to say a few words on the new development. In fact, we will enter, the DG Research will enter in a year of reflection for launching a food research area in order to bring greater coherence to the food and nutrition research. And I would like to strongly invite you to participate in this new strategy over the coming year to prepare this food research area.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, I think we are taking all notes of these interventions. Later on, when we come to the halfway through, I will try to do a very, very quick summary. But now, Anne, up to you.
Thank you, Roberto. So I would like to focus on the topic that you raised in your opening remarks about delivering research to the last inch, as you call it. So recently, the Syngenta Foundation undertook an analysis to try to understand why African farmers were not adopting improved varieties. And what they found is that except for some non-indigenous varieties like maize and soy, the adoption rates for the improved varieties that have been the subject of research were quite low. So for pigeon pea, less than 50%, for sorghum, less than 30%, for millet, less than 20%. So why is this? Well, a recent study from Mexico gives one answer, perhaps, and that is that farmers in Mexico have certainly adopted improved varieties of maize on good soil. But the farmers who have poor soils are not adopting the improved varieties. They are continuing with their traditional varieties. And why is this? Because these varieties seem to be better adapted for those kinds of conditions which have difficult soils, difficult climates. So how can we reach those farmers and help to develop varieties that they will use that are improved, that gets higher yields? Well, the first thing is to ask the farmers. And we at Bioversity are working in 11 countries now on a project we call Seeds for Needs, where we are using new ways of participatory plant breeding, actually surveying farmers about what they want from their crops, what they want from their varieties, but not just about the agronomic traits, but also about the culinary traits, about side benefits like the amount of straw that might be available for their animals to eat. And what we're finding is by going back into gene banks, into national gene banks, and mining those gene banks for the traditional varieties, we are finding varieties that perform better in these marginal conditions than what the improved varieties have been able to do, again, in these marginal conditions. And I think what we need to think about is not just how we can provide the information from farmers and I have to say from the people who are cooking the food about what they want, what kinds of traits they want in their final crop, and feed that information into the breeding programs. But we also have to think about how we can help seed companies to service those farmers who may be in quite niche markets, but in fact, if you add them all up, they can come to something that would be interesting for a seed company to deliver on. And I want to briefly talk about an innovation in the publishing industry, because I think it's very relevant. So in the old days in the book publishing industry, 1,000 authors, similar to the breeding discussion we heard earlier, 1,000 authors might submit a book to a publishing company. Publishing company would pick 2 of those and say, we think we can sell millions of copies of this around the world, and the rest of those authors never got their work published. We now have something called Amazon.com and many other similar websites where consumers, we can go and buy books from these authors who may have only 1 or 2 or 3 million consumers, as opposed to 10 million or 20 million that some of the big authors do. We need to think about those kinds of business models for agriculture. So that would be one point. The second point, just on the forum. So there was recently a very informal, very casual survey of the CGIAR donors, of which the EU is one, and a survey of experts about what they thought should be the priorities for research. So from the donors, genetic gain, of course, pre- and post-harvest losses, and value capture, all very important. From the experts, many of the issues that are also being talked about by this forum: conservation of biodiversity, dietary diversity, the safety of inputs, risk reduction. Food safety was ranked low by both groups. So to wrap up, One of the things I think this forum can help to do is to bridge that disconnect from what the experts think are important research investments and where some of the donors are focusing their funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Quite obviously, I was not at that meeting. Now, Signor Ladislao Martin Neto, la palavra a você.
Good morning, or most good afternoon. Thank you, Roberto. It's my pleasure to be here. As representative of a developing or emerging country, I just address a few words about Brazil. Currently, you are a net exporter, the second biggest country exporter. But 80% of our production remain in Brazil for our 200 million of inhabitants. This was different in 40 years ago. You are totally dependent of food importation, including donation from USAID and other countries. And this was a kind of big revolution in the country. And as tropical country, some specificities were necessary to overcome, to constrain, for example, to produce in the savanna area with soil acidity, aluminum toxicity, rainfall regime, the specific biome. All these technologies were developed based in science, technology, and innovation. And Embrapa, that is my institution, is considered a key institution in the country in the agriculture research. Start with strong international cooperation, with training of our scientists abroad in US, in Europe, in Asia, in Oceania. This was crucial to have a background then to develop agriculture based in science with crop adaptation, soil correction, and naturally some sustainable practice. And then in this forum, I believe that this experience can help other developing emerging countries, mainly in the tropics. You are able to make a knowledge transfer, to work together in the South-South cooperation, North-South cooperation that can help other countries to overcome also difficulties in this challenge to become more productive and to have food security. And currently, also it's important to say that you have used less than half of our land availability. The Brazil made a commitment in the COP15 to reduce 40% of greenhouse gas emission, to stop deforestation. More than 50% of our land, our area is preserved, include Amazon rainforest. This is a very recent achievement of a Brazilian society that is very important to inform to everybody. And our plan to the future is to work in more sustainable way. You have a plan called low carbon agriculture plan from Brazilian government to give stimulus to farmers to adopt sustainable practices as no-till, as biological control, biological nitrogen fixation, as pest integrated management with biological control. This is all these management practices are sustainable, and Brazil is make a strong effort to stimulate farmers to adopt this practice. And this is not simple, but this is important goals that our country has in recent years to give a contribution to the planet and to work together. But I emphasize international cooperation between different countries is crucial to address this challenging question regarding food security. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before we pass to the second lot, I would like to pick up few keywords from you. And first of all, I would like to thank you for the discipline in keeping time. This has been marvelous. Thank you very much. Please note the gender imbalance in my panel. This is made on purpose by the organization, obviously, but this gives also more interesting biodiversity to the discussion. The territory, research and innovation, technology transfer, human capital. I fixed that human capital because it is essential. The two examples that you have brought, Assessore, about Granarolo in Tanzania and the adaptation of machineries for India is very, very important. On the clustering of the machinery for agribusiness development, the value chain, it is fundamental. What I say to change the perception of farming. Today, how many of you have lived and worked in Africa? For more than 10 years. Well, then you know very well that one big problem is the perception of farming. Until perception of farming will be feeding self and feeding the family, we will go nowhere. When farming will become like in Emilia-Romagna, a business, something to be proud of, something that can bring my children to Harvard University, then we will succeed in our challenge. It's a cultural modality that we have to shift. Farming is a business like being professor at university, but today is not. Today farming is the default position of not having other chances. Migration is related to this. We don't manage to create jobs. Jobs not just to feed selves, but jobs to become rich and traveling the world and going and having Ferrari, like in Emilia-Romagna. Now, Isabel told us about the multidisciplinarity of research. I think the forum can help on that. Not only research, but also with the society, with the business. The business. Show in Emilia-Romagna, in Africa, how you do it. You will see leaders, ministers, presidents will come to you, will listen to you, as they were listening to us when we were proposing agribusiness with Agrify. Today, the situation is much more conducive. Then we heard these inspiring words from Anne. Anne, you have been long in the research, in agriculture, in biodiversity. Now you are the head of bioversity. This expert-donors dichotomy that you mentioned, we can help, Fabio, to pass it. So I think the scientific committee of the forum can help to dissolve this divide. And finally, the very inspiring words of the Green Revolution of Brazil. Well, we know that the head of FIO has something to do with that. And of course, it is a success story that with success story, with examples to follow, with inspirations, then we obtain everything. Because at the end of the day, the human being is at the center of this project, as it is at the center of the forum. With this presentation, Michela, your intervention is most welcome.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for inviting me here. And so I try to bring the perspective of the food industry to this very nice conversation. So as Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition with the Carta di Milano, the Milan Charter, we have tried to contribute to raise the discussion around all these social food paradoxes that we also mentioned today, the excess of food, the access to the food, hunger, obesity, production, availability, food waste, also the use of land for food or for feed or for fuel. So I think that the food industries are for sure part of these problems, and they must also be part of the solution. And this means that we have to drive our research and innovation programs to look for such solution. So how to do this? Maybe I think we can reverse the traditional approach from exploiting the food technologies to look for new products to please the consumer, switching to look for sustainable solution to the new consumer needs. And I think that that's the point. We have to go from giving the consumer what they want to trying to giving the consumer what they really need. And of course, what do they need today? It is, of course, about taste, convenience, longer shelf life, and of course, food safety, nutritional needs, regardless the countries where we live. But we are consumer altogether, so we also need a clean planet. We also need a better place to live, and of course, taking into account also the animal welfare, which is important. And so, what should we do? I think that we must put again the consumer at the center of our research and innovation path. And which means doing research, thinking about new products, new services, new business models, which satisfy and meet the need of the consumer which is everybody. I mean, we all are the consumer. So we have to satisfy these needs at the same time, which is quite new for me if we think to the approach of the research and innovation in the last 25 years. And that's why we in Barilla, we are trying to work in a different way which is about product reformulation, developing packaging more sustainable, raw material development, trying to involve all the stakeholders, which means that we have to share our long-term research programs, our long-term research goals with all our suppliers, the universities that are working with us, the SMEs that are working with us today, and also the startups, and maybe some single entrepreneurs that could be relevant to solve our problems. And we are experiencing some very few small cases, success cases, that are very interesting to share with you today. The first one is the Barilla Sustainable Farming, where we have demonstrated for the time being only in Italy, but we want to try to do it also in other countries, of course, that our farmers can improve their yields, reducing by 30% their costs, having a better quality in the crops they are growing, using the ancient rotation agricultural practices. And this, I think it is very interesting. And I will conclude with this example, because I think that this means that we have to rethink the whole approach. We don't maybe have to reinvent the wheel or to look for new and emerging technologies to scale up, but maybe we have just to share our knowledge and to scale down technologies and practices that we already have here in the developed countries. And scaling down and simplify technology maybe could be a way to try to solve and to have a real impact in the future also for the development countries.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Professor Luigi Bodria, prego.
Grazie Presidente. Il tema della fame nel mondo si appoggia su due fattori estremamente seri e drammatici. Fame vuol dire mancanza di risorse alimentari e le risorse alimentari vanno prodotte. Bene, i due problemi che affliggono i paesi in via di sviluppo sono delle rese per ettaro delle coltivazioni estremamente, drammaticamente basse e, come ben sottolineava uno dei relatori precedenti, degli altissimi valori di perdite che avvengono soprattutto nell'azienda agricola. E quindi, come ci insegna il nostro stesso percorso, che da cacciatore e raccoglitore ci ha portato a essere agricoltore e da agricoltore andare sulla Luna, noi per migliaia di anni, fino all'epoca dei lumi, abbiamo sviluppato la nostra economia basata sull'agricoltura, sulle tecnologie, sulle semplici tecnologie, la ferratura dei cavalli, i mulini, il processo evolutivo si è basato sulla tecnologia. Quindi, per cominciare a dare un contributo sostanziale e diffuso alla base degli agricoltori, noi dobbiamo inizialmente dare il primo gradino, il primo livello di sviluppo dell'agricoltura, che è delle piccole tecnologie appropriate, adattate alle condizioni locali, alle condizioni sociali, eccetera. Bene, sono 40 anni che i paesi industrializzati cercano di fare questo, ma come l'hanno fatto? L'hanno fatto in maniera sbagliata, perché molto spesso a dire aiutiamo gli agricoltori dei paesi in via di sviluppo, scusate, ha voluto dire bene, prendiamo le nostre vecchie macchine che non sono più appropriate e adatte alle nostre condizioni e le mandiamo in Africa. Bene, sono stati 40 anni di insuccessi. 40 anni che hanno portato anche un po' di scoramento. La stessa FAO a un certo punto ha chiuso la sua sezione di meccanizzazione nei paesi di sviluppo. Bene, questo io spero che sia uno dei punti di acquisizione di questa nuova visione del problema alimentare mondiale. Cioè l'assistenza ai paesi in via di sviluppo deve essere portata con tecnologie che siano veramente alla portata degli agricoltori, e dobbiamo anche insegnare agli agricoltori a cambiare la loro mentalità, perché si tratta di, scusate, di muovere e di modificare delle tradizioni che sono radicate da millenni. Quindi progetti coordinati, integrati, e l'Emilia Romagna, con questo suo fantastico background di esperienza e di risorse nel campo della produzione di macchine agricole, e che parte dalle più semplici fino ad arrivare adesso alle macchine con i satelliti, potrebbe dare un eccellente contributo in collaborazione con le agenzie internazionali per incominciare un nuovo approccio all'assistenza allo sviluppo di quei paesi. Grazie.
Grazie professore, breve e chiarissimo. Sometimes it's a cultural value that matters. In rural Africa, very, very often, you have to grow maize. Malawi, Kenya, Tanzania. If you don't grow maize, even if you grow sorghum or millet and you make more money with that, or cashew nuts, you are not a man. As a household, you must grow maize. Very, very interesting stories from the field. But now, our panel, Diana Battaglia, prego.
Io vi ringrazio. Dirigo l'UNIDO da 10 anni. L'UNIDO è un'agenzia delle Nazioni Unite, un'agenzia specializzata delle Nazioni Unite che si occupa di industrializzazione. Il nostro ruolo in Italia è quello di stimolare gli imprenditori italiani a trasferire tecnologia, a trasferire know-how in paesi in via di sviluppo e in economia in transizione. Ecco, l'UNIDO anche gli viene conferito anche un ruolo che è un ruolo chiave nel campo dell'agroalimentare e dell'agroindustria, e che sono considerati settori basilari per lo sviluppo degli altri comparti industriali, oltre a rappresentare un vero valore aggiunto strategico in gran parte di questi paesi in via di sviluppo. Ecco, un ruolo fondamentale in questo sviluppo deve essere concesso ai giovani e alle donne, ma non solo per le abusate questioni etiche sulla parità di genere, eccetera, eccetera, ma perché c'è una convenienza economica. Ci sono molti dati, per esempio, che testimoniano dove le donne lavorano di più, le economie crescono anche molto più in fretta. Per quanto riguarda invece l'agricoltura, questo sicuramente abbiamo valutato su alcuni studi che, per esempio, in Africa subsahariana e nell'Asia meridionale, dove quasi il 70% della forza lavoro femminile è impiegata in agricoltura, ma solo il 20% sono proprietari di terre. Ecco, la Fondazione Barilla in uno studio, in una recente ricerca, ha assicurato che queste diciamo, aree venissero dato più spazio alle donne, la produzione potrebbe crescere anche del 30%. Ecco. E questo è un primo approccio diciamo così, al problema. Noi abbiamo sviluppato come UNIDO diversi programmi in oltre 50 paesi, e l'UNIDO ha anche il ruolo di mediatore per trovare un terreno comune per garantire che tutti gli sforzi vengano e vadano nella giusta direzione. Ecco, durante l'Expo noi di UNIDO abbiamo messo in piedi un premio internazionale, per riagganciarmi al suo discorso, professore, che si intitola Idee innovative e tecnologie per l'agribusiness, che è stato organizzato insieme al CNR nel palinsesto della cooperazione internazionale. Ecco, questo premio aveva avuto lo scopo quello di creare un circolo virtuoso di connessioni tra il mondo privato, accademico, finanziario, istituzionale, in modo da far emergere, quindi catalogare, selezionare, divulgare le migliori tecnologie e idee innovative provenienti da start-up, da realtà imprenditoriali e centri di ricerca che possono essere applicate con successo nei paesi in via di sviluppo, perché ha ragione lei, non tutto si riesce ad applicare nei paesi in via di sviluppo, quindi dobbiamo cercare, in questo senso l'Italia sta facendo degli sforzi enormi, anche proprio mi riaggancio a quello che diceva l'assessore, per esempio nel comparto di Parma. Molte aziende sono molto sensibili a questo e studiano macchinari, tecnologie che possono essere applicate in questi paesi. Ecco, quello che dobbiamo fare è cercare una relazione strategica tra tutti questi puzzle. Un'altra cosa che noi abbiamo studiato nel tempo era, ovviamente ci occupiamo di industrializzazione, era che era importante raccogliere la sfida sulle perdite post raccolta e sulla mancanza di tecnologie di lavorazione e conservazione in questi paesi. E abbiamo capito che non era tanto un problema di produzione quanto un problema di rifiuti che purtroppo erano la causa soprattutto di inefficienze. Ecco, noi abbiamo studiato alcuni aspetti. Volevo darvi due dati secondo me importanti per capire quanto sia importante il food processing e quanto sia importante il packaging in tutta questa. Dunque, in Africa, pensate che in Africa subsahariana le perdite post raccolta, secondo uno studio della Banca Mondiale, sono pari a 4 miliardi di dollari l'anno, che è la stessa quantità di aiuti alimentari distribuiti alla regione nell'ultimo decennio. E poi un altro dato che volevo dare, poi chiudo giuro, negli ultimi 30 anni il 95% degli investimenti destinati alla ricerca agricola nella regione subsahariana si è concentrato su come aumentare la produttività della terra e solo il 5% su come combattere le perdite post raccolta. Noi abbiamo, e giuro un minuto solo, neanche 30 secondi, voglio dirvi che sempre noi di Unido insieme a Ipakima, che è una delle maggiori fiere internazionali del settore, abbiamo organizzato l'anno scorso la prima fiera del packaging in Africa, a Nairobi, ha avuto un grandissimo successo, 60 sono state le imprese italiane, oltre ovviamente stranieri, ed ha avuto veramente molto successo. Poi ci risentiamo dopo.
Grazie, grazie mille. Roger, you are last but certainly not least.
We'll
Please.
see, we'll see. Thank you, Roberto.
That doesn't mean that I give you 5 minutes, though. You have still 3.
I'm asking for 8. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I won't go over many of the things that my colleagues here on the podium have already said, but I want to make a couple of points. One, I come from UC Davis, University of California, Davis, which has been ranked as the #1 school of agriculture and environment, and actually geography as well, and in veterinary science. Now, I see my colleagues from Wageningen are not here right now. They would dispute, perhaps, but there's a lot of discovery that's in our universities. The question is, how do we get those university scientists, those university professors more engaged in outcomes? And so the role of the World Food Center is a chancellor's initiative to try to engage from the breadth of economics and policy and markets to the social sciences through animal sciences and nutrition and health, and breeding of plants and genetics and the basic science. How do you get all of those together, the skills together, to make more of all the investments that we have in our great universities? And that's the question. So we've posed it at the World Food Center to start with saying that we will work across the full of the university. A full comprehensive university from medicine to agriculture should engage them all. And so with that, you'd say, what is the role of food in nutrition and health, or in animal health, or in environmentalism, underlying, with sustainability underlying all of it? Sustainability not only in the environment, but sustainability for the economy of the farmer. If the farmer doesn't make money, he doesn't stay on the land, and the kids will go to school. So let's not confuse this with the small romantic nature of agriculture, but the reality of income. So the question is, how do you do that? But secondly, let's focus not on amount of food, but quality of food, and on nutrition. The FAO has told us that with the kind of progress to increase production by the new genetic methods and the new precision agriculture, we can meet caloric needs. And we've made great strides in the last 15 years or 10 years in decreasing the chronically underfed. But we haven't met the needs of the chronically malnourished. So the focus needs to be increasingly not only on the commodities, but on the vegetables and fruits, which give us the nutrition. And of course, California prides itself in it being the nutrition basket of the world. Our farm gate value this year is going to be nearly 55 billion US dollars as farm gate, notwithstanding the drought, because we've learned to water more carefully and the prices are higher as a consequence. But in any event, we should make perhaps the raison d'etre of agriculture and nutrition and health, so that we're in the health business and the nutrition business at the same time as the food business. So how do you get there? And because it is those crops that are missing in Africa or in poor societies, where starch is the major source of nutrition, cassava or rice, even wheat in many cases, and the root and tuber crops. So how do you substitute that for nutritional crops? And so there has to be a pull from the marketplace. That means there has to be financial accessibility. You have to afford to buy a tomato in order to get the farmer to grow the tomato. So the underlying issues in rural Africa will be around economics, and they will be around accessibility. Secondly, these crops are also the heaviest users of chemical pesticides of all crops. In Europe, the use of agrochemicals is as high or higher in vegetable crops as it is in the commodities. We need to make a real effort, as Dr. Visser has demonstrated in the case of late blight, of finding ways to control the use of agrochemicals. It's not to say that they're all bad. Some say that some are better than others. But a goal should be to work our way towards genetic solutions and integrated pest management solutions and sustainable solutions around instead of the chemistry side. That's accessibility for the farmer in Africa as well. But that means we need to invest in research in order to make that happen. Secondly, or the third piece I want to point out is that we've talked about nutrition and food safety in the same voice, and I think that's a really good thing to do. We should focus on all the components that are involved in both of those sides. And the food safety side, that we've been asked by China to play a major role in helping them to restructure some of their research efforts towards food safety. Something in the range of 20% of their land is contaminated by air pollution and is unsafe to grow crops. What is the answer that they will find in producing safe food as a consequence of having dirty soils? This is an issue that's in a developing economy that's already very strong. These kind of questions are also present in smallholder farmers and the degraded lands that Anne and others have talked about, and the importance of biodiversity in those contexts. And Brazil has managed to solve some of these problems. And I think the challenges of finding out from our universities the solutions that we need, but bringing them to bear on real questions that impact society is a challenge that needs to take place and needs to be solved, and they should be on the areas on applying those to areas that are truly useful for society. And I think, as much as anything, that is in nutrition and health, rather than in food per se.
Thank you very much. I owe to them small keywords, as you have also noted down: rotation, the experience of Barilla, consumer at the center. It seems that Roger was saying producer at the center, or rather both. And I think from Luigi, we heard about the respect for the appropriate technology, which makes a sense of adopting technologies which are not second class, but in fact first class. The vertical integration model, reducing post-harvest that was mentioned by Assessore and also by Diana, is a testimony on that. Private sector needs to play a strong role. This is clear. Investments are public, but most importantly must be private. And in order to trigger the private investments, we have to work towards it. This is the role of the donors in conducive environment for investing, and also on policies in recipient countries. We have listened from the issue of women, 30% more production. I have not met in my 21 years one cooperative made by men that worked. So when we ask Granarolo to repeat experiences, he should be careful that they are women, because otherwise it doesn't work. And the same is on nutrition, malnourished children. This is a very big, there are still 160 million children that are malnourished one way or the other. And very often it's not a question of quantity, it's a question of quality. And very, very often it comes to the mother. And the mother very often is a 15, 16, 17 years old girl that doesn't know that avocado contains so much vitamins that the baby needs for complement rice, maize, or whatever it is. A big round of applause to the panelists, please. 2 questions, only if you can formulate in 10 seconds. 1. Micro? Can we give the micro to this gentleman? 10 seconds for your question. I take another one from a lady. No ladies? Yes. Thank you. And then Fabio, you must pose a question. No.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, thanks.
Very briefly, immediately the questions. Why the agricultural mechanization is considered the Cinderella when you think about feeding the world. I give you an example. In 1890, in order to harvest 100 kilo of corn, it takes 1 hour. In 2020, in 1 hour, you harvest 62,000 kilos of corn.
So, mechanization, why is the Cinderella of our talk? The lady down there, please, the micro. You prepare your answers. Yes, thank you. Prego. Voice to the ladies, please. There's a coup d'etat. Paola, non ti ho visto. We take exceptionally a third.
Good morning. Okay, I work in a French think tank in agriculture, and I'm a little surprised not to have heard some of the buzzwords that I hear in my country, France. Like bioeconomy, I think has not been pronounced much this morning. Agroecology is a very important word in France. It's like the #1 priority of the Ministry of Agriculture. Climate smart agriculture is another very important word.
Okay,
so
thank you.
that's one thing. Maybe I have some time to ask something else. Maybe the cultural dimension of food and eating and transmission, the pleasure of eating and pleasure of cooking is something that is very important to be mentioned. And we talked about culinary traits earlier, but it may be something really important in both developed and developing countries.
Thank you, thank you. You see, when you give democracy to the masses, they profit. Fabio, you are the scientific coordinator, and you are the right to a big question to the panelists.
What about the political and social actions to put on place for allowing the local people to select the technology, to select the partners for growing things locally? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, there are 3 questions on the table, all very interesting. Who wants to give a shot? You have to be very telegraphic, because I owe in 3 minutes the closure to Paolo. Anna, you start, Paolo after, please. Sorry, Luigi.
Perhaps to address the questions from the lady from France. So in terms of agroecology, one of the efforts my organization is undertaking is to look at how we can use agricultural biodiversity to manage pest and disease resistance. And earlier we heard the speech about the very high technology ways to do that. But we also are finding when you can mix 3, 4, 5 different varieties of beans, for example, in Uganda, you get substantial, up to 60% drops in the damage that's caused by pests. So this is a very low tech, if you will, but high knowledge way to provide a way to manage pest and disease and food losses for farmers in developing countries. Just quickly on the cultural dimension. So I just came from Peru last week, where we launched an initiative to pay farmers to conserve varieties of quinoa that are becoming more rare. And Peru is the epitome of food culture, where it's not only valued that people have calories, not only valued people have nutrition, but also that the cultural traditions are being honored. I happened to be there during the Mistura, which is a big Peruvian food fair where they bring people in from all the different cultures of Peru to celebrate. So biodiversity also has to be part of that culinary tradition and ensuring that people are enjoying their food, not just receiving nutrition from it.
Thank you. Luigi?
Thank you. Rispondo alla prima domanda: perché la meccanizzazione è la Cinderella delle tecnologie? Perché noi veniamo purtroppo dalla età della Milano da bere. Questa stessa Expo ci dice che il problema alimentare è soprattutto incentrato sull'alimento, ma c'è poca attenzione al fatto che l'alimento deriva da una produzione agricola che sta a valle e che deve produrre. E quindi questo ha portato alla diminuzione degli studenti nelle facoltà di agraria negli ultimi 20 anni, perché nessuno voleva mandare il figlio a studiare da contadino. Okay. Adesso finalmente io spero che una grande acquisizione che uscirà da questo Expo sia quello di capire che il settore primario è veramente il settore primario, e cioè la base dello sviluppo dell'uomo e del mondo futuro. La produzione agricola deve essere riportata al centro dell'attenzione e con essa tutti i fattori adesso necessari. Per quanto riguarda cosa fare nei paesi in via di sviluppo, bisogna coordinarsi tra loro, tra noi, le risorse che abbiamo, i donors, per finanziare dei progetti che siano integrati veramente alle abitudini e alle tradizioni e che li possano modificare in meglio.
Grazie Luigi. Martin.
Yes, you address about bioeconomy. For sure, this is a very relevant topic. In Brazil, you have ethanol as cars fuel. Is for 50% of our cars, the oil or fuel use. And for the future, for biomaterials, for different activities, and include the biodiversity use and application. This is the future. Then you are very engaged in this agenda as an important topic for the future. If you permit just a comment about this topic regarding the mechanization, actually I understand that you move to automation, that you have reduced people in the fields. You must improve use of our machine with the precision farm and the others, also to give more sustainability for our production system. Then for sure this mechanization, automation, will be critical, is one of our priority also.
Thank you, Martin. Roger?
Final comment, last comment on bioeconomy, another one. I think that we talked a lot about food waste, and we can find in food waste a way to monetize, to create value out of waste. And I think we haven't asked the engineers to look as hard as they can at the minor elements, the major components, the minor components of food waste that could be monetized into a nanomaterial or into some sort of packaging activity. We need to get our engineers involved more in the chemistry of foods and the biology of food, so that we end up with an economy that makes use of the water we use to grow the crops and the fertilizer. So I think there's another part for the bioeconomy. We need better imagination, more innovation there.
Thank you. Palma.
Including in developing countries, by the way.
Palma, considerazioni conclusive prima di dare la parola a Paolo.
Velocemente, in 3 minuti non si riescono a trattare tutti i temi. L'Emilia-Romagna su alcuni temi come i prodotti biologici, il tema dell'agroambiente, sta investendo e investirà anche parecchie risorse proprio con i programmi strutturali. Il tema della sostenibilità è un tema che è declinato, diciamo, a 360 gradi. Poi non c'è tempo però ci sono i siti, si può vedere quello che stiamo investendo. Però mi interessava recuperare un concetto. Quello che cerchiamo come Emilia-Romagna di trasferire. Non esiste, secondo me, un settore Cenerentola. Meccanizzazione non è per noi, che siamo oltretutto grandi produttori di macchine, quindi sia macchine agricole, il packaging, tutto il tema della conservazione del cibo, per noi sarebbe assurdo ragionare. Il tema è che bisogna che noi consideriamo due cose. Uno, tutta la filiera, cioè è importante che la consideriamo tutta, considerandola quindi dal campo fino alla tavola, adesso diciamo anche dopo, perché c'è anche il tema dei rifiuti. In questa filiera tutti devono essere protagonisti, davvero con una capacità di innovazione e di come si dice, introduzione anche proprio di conoscenza, cioè condividendola, insomma. Questo è l'altro elemento che a noi interessa porre oggi. L'altra cosa, mi voglio soffermare un attimo sul tema della cooperazione, perché io sono d'accordissimo con quello che diceva il professore. Io ho parlato di cooperazione nel trasferimento tecnologico e della conoscenza, perché nella parola cooperazione ci sta il rispetto degli altri, quindi ci sta davvero un rapporto alla pari, una relazione che deve permettere noi e gli altri di capirsi rispetto alle cose che sono necessarie in quel momento, in quella situazione, con quella cultura, rispetto agli obiettivi, che gli obiettivi sono chiaramente quello di permettere a queste persone di avere una vita dignitosa, di lavorare, di avere un reddito per se stessi e per gli altri. Quindi in questo concetto, ripeto, di cooperazione, il fatto, voglio dire, della ricerca e del trasferimento tecnologico e di mettersi insieme, quindi le università, i centri di ricerca, i territori, i comuni, le imprese, cioè le nostre imprese, quello che sta facendo Barilla, che è un esempio, ma noi siamo un territorio di piccole e medie imprese. Questo per esempio è un altro elemento, è una ricchezza che l'Emilia-Romagna può portare rispetto a territori che spesso vengono da questa tradizione o che hanno questa piccola tradizione, ma che spesso conoscono solo le multinazionali, che non conoscono un approccio come quello che è stato sviluppato in Emilia-Romagna, proprio perché si possano sviluppare anche, diciamo, piccole realtà produttive. Questo è l'esempio, per esempio, dell'agricoltura, della cooperazione tra produttori che danno grandi risultati. Ecco, questa è la sfida, credo, che noi abbiamo, di capirci, di non andare là come se fossimo oggettivamente quelli che hanno il verbo. Non l'abbiamo il verbo,
Grazie.
abbiamo la capacità di lavorare con loro. Grazie mille.
Grazie Assessore. It is my pleasure now. I will not try to synthesize, not giving keywords. I think the presentation was fantastic. My question was, why another forum? Why another platform? I have the answer, and I'm very happy about that. Respect food, not only production, but also consumption. Water, nexus, energy, because this is only about humanity, about dignity, about peace and prosperity. Paolo, up to you. Thank you very much.
Ma più che fare delle conclusioni, soltanto una serie di ringraziamenti. Innanzitutto credo che la giornata di oggi, grazie anche a Fabio Fava, Roberto Ridolfi, nei due panel ci hanno fatto capire che la Regione Emilia-Romagna ha visto giusto perché raccogliere questa eredità straordinaria dell'Expo è davvero una responsabilità importante, ma abbiamo anche capito che tutti possiamo fare qualcosa intorno a questo grande tema del cibo e della sicurezza alimentare, della disponibilità di tutti noi di poter contribuire, se non a dare le risposte a tutte le domande che ci siamo posti oggi, almeno essere capaci di farci le domande giuste. Può essere banale, ma non è così. Ciascuno di noi, nelle varie responsabilità istituzionali, governative, di ricercatori, di esperti, possono sicuramente darci un contributo su come dare una piccola risposta a queste grandi sfide. Ma la prima e più importante di tutti, credo che oggi con la giornata ne abbiamo avuto chiaramente la consapevolezza che il problema è davvero più grande di noi, nel senso che è più grande di un'iniziativa pur così interessante e partecipata come quella di oggi, e che merita un'attenzione che vada al di là del 31 ottobre, cioè che vada al di là dell'Expo, no? Perché a volte non ci rendiamo conto, ma con i nostri comportamenti quotidiani, quando parliamo di spreco alimentare, con le nostre responsabilità a tutti i livelli, possiamo dare un contributo alla soluzione o quantomeno un contributo verso una soluzione a queste grandi sfide. Ecco, noi abbiamo, credo, la Regione Emilia-Romagna ha dato questa opportunità per tutti noi, quindi io mi auguro che possa diventare davvero un network. Qui si vince non nell'essere grandi o piccoli, ma si vince se siamo in rete collegati. Abbiamo avuto uno spaccato delle grandi opportunità che il mondo della ricerca può dare. Ecco, dobbiamo cercare di continuare ad accrescere questa consapevolezza. Quindi grazie a tutti voi, noi continueremo in questo sforzo, continueremo naturalmente nel fissare già da oggi i prossimi appuntamenti, perché la cosa più importante che vogliamo fare è continuare a mantenere questo network vivo. Lo faremo in tutti i modi, vedremo come, Palma, Simona, vedremo come riuscire a trasformare questo World Food Research Innovation Forum nella opportunità un po' per tutti di poter dare un contributo e di mantenere viva questa grande attenzione in tema della food security, il tema della sicurezza alimentare. Grazie ancora a tutti voi, grazie ancora a Roberto e a Fabio, e soprattutto grazie alla Regione Emilia-Romagna per averlo pensato e per averci dato questa bella giornata oggi, che naturalmente continuerà questo pomeriggio e continuerà poi domani con la parte più politica. Grazie ancora e buona pausa pranzo.